The sky outside the palace was a gloomy gray, the heavy rain pouring down without end. Inside a luxurious room in the palace, the atmosphere was still and silent. Arisia, with a cold expression, sat silently on a chair with her arms crossed. The door suddenly opened. Softly, Arisia's nanny, Isabella Bretti, carrying a tray of desserts, smiled gently and spoke. "Your Highness, it's time for dessert." Arisia looked down at the book on the table and sighed heavily, saying, "That's enough, Isabella. There are food shortages during the war. Dessert is too extravagant." Isabella flinched at these words and quickly called out, "Your Highness." To Isabella, Arisia was incredibly noble and beautiful, and she constantly praised her. "You are the emperor's only daughter. Even though your highness is only 9 years old, you already have the bearing of a royal." She bowed, offering the dessert tray, and anxiously comforted Arisia. "His Majesty will surely be very proud when he returns from the battlefield." Arisia remained silent, her head bowed in thought. Then Arisia suddenly gave a knowing smile and said with utter certainty, "How could that be? Despite having royal blood, the only thing I have is the flowery name, Arisia Zelapecia." The image of her father appeared in Arisia's mind, powerful yet coldly distant. Moreover, the man she called father had gone to war when she was 6, and that war had yet to see an end after 3 years. Arisia glanced out the window. The rain was still falling. Isabella placed the plate of sweets on the table. Thinking Arisia was worried about her father, she softly reassured her, "Your Highness, please don't worry. His Majesty will certainly return victorious." Isabella clenched her fists, determined, and said, I want to cry. "If anything happens, I will protect you to the very end." Arisia awkwardly replied, "Thank you." Then she fell silent, resting her chin on her hand and sighing. Arisia's thoughts surfaced in frustration. If mana still existed, I would have ended everything, regardless of war or anything else. There was an ancient legend passed down in the Empire about the White Witch, who only appeared on snowy nights and could grant wishes to humanity. That person was her. Thanks to the legend that if one prayed earnestly on the night of a full moon, the White Witch would grant their wish, many people placed their hopes and prayers in her. Arisia, back then, only listened silently to everyone's prayers. Those heartfelt and earnest prayers reached her. "My wish, to put it simply, is that you are very powerful." But for some reason, when she opened her eyes again, she had lost all her power and been reborn as the daughter of the tyrannical emperor, a child who lost her mother at birth, bearing the name Arisia. The emperor's murderous gaze was still vivid in Arisia's memory, perhaps because he thought the empress's death was her fault. So, the emperor abandoned her, a mere child, in the princess's palace. And so, for 9 years, she had been confined here and had never seen the emperor's face. Arisia pondered, gently poking the cake in front of her with her fork. Her thoughts continued, and Isabella was the one who raised her, the one who even those of the same blood abandoned. Isabella's face was always full of affection. She was Arisia's only nanny, the one who loved her the most in this palace. She gently lifted the blanket and said softly, "It's raining so hard." Isabella carefully draped the blanket over Arisia, gently reminding her, "Your Highness must be careful not to catch a cold in this weather." Arisia didn't reply, only quietly lowered her eyes. Then she suddenly looked up and out the window. Outside, the sky was still gloomy, and the rain was pouring down heavily. The gray sky was suddenly illuminated by bright flashes of lightning. Arisia clutched the blanket tightly around herself, her eyes wide with surprise as she looked outside. The whole sky seemed to be torn apart by a streak of light, and the sound of thunder echoed through the dark sky. Isabella jumped and cried out, "Goodness, that startled me." Arisia was still staring blankly out the window, wondering, what was that just now? Suddenly, Arisia froze as if she sensed something. Isabella drew the curtains closed and turned back to Arisia with a forced smile. "Your Highness," she asked, "when do you think the war will end?" Arisia softly replied, "Let's see soon." But before she could finish her sentence, the hurried sound of footsteps in the hallway suddenly interrupted them. Both Isabella and Arisia turned in surprise at the noise. The person rushing towards them was a knight, sweat dripping from his brow, but still urgently calling out, "Princess, your Highness." Isabella quickly stepped forward to reprimand him. "You are being disrespectful. How dare you barge into the princess's chambers?" The knight paid no attention to her scolding, his voice still full of panic. "The emperor." Isabella gasped and covered her mouth upon hearing the knight's news. He has fallen. Arisha's face remained impassive. She only glanced at him and thought, I'm 9 years old now, and an orphan. Arisha clenched her fist, and a powerful surge of mana emanated from her hand. More importantly, her suddenly vanished magical power had returned. The knight bowed to Arisha, his voice now calmer. Fortunately, we have won the war. He continued to report to her, but in the final battle, the Emperor... But Arisha suddenly interrupted him. What is your name? The knight looked up at her, slightly surprised, but replied, Yes, Subin Isap, your highness. After receiving his answer, Arisha stood up. In the large room, her voice rang out clearly. All right, Sir Isap, you belong to the 5th Night Squad, correct? Subin hesitated for a moment before cautiously replying. Yes, that's right. Arisha walked towards him, step by step, and said softly, You have forgotten something. Subin looked up and stammered. What is it? She stood firmly before him, her tone sharp, and no matter how urgent the situation, barging into the princess's room without permission. Subin paled at Arisha's icy question. Whose law is that? He stared down at Arisha, incredulous. Did the princess always have this kind of personality? Subin hastily knelt down and apologized that I apologize, your highness. Arisha brushed past him coldly, not forgetting to add, even if I am an imprisoned princess, you have no right to look down on me. Arisha quickly left before Isabella's astonished gaze. She didn't show any sadness over her father's death. Arisha smirked inwardly, thinking the emperor suddenly passed away. I'm his only child, so naturally, the heir has already been decided. Isabella picked up her skirt and hurried after her, anxiously asking, Your Highness, where are you going, Your Highness? Arisha didn't reply, still lost in thought. Since things have turned out this way, I might as well try being emperor. Arisha walked straight to the end of the hallway, where an imposing wooden door stood before her. Inside the room, the nobles of the empire were already assembled. They were arguing noisily amongst themselves. We must find a new bloodline to become emperor. The conservative nobles refused to listen to each other, each insistent on their own way that if we follow the plan, shouldn't there be at least one survivor? They pointed fingers at each other angrily, bickering. That's absurd. The emperor killed all of his bloodline when he ascended the throne. So what are we supposed to do now? Suddenly, the door to the meeting room exploded, sending out a cloud of dust and smoke. A noble standing near the door didn't have time to react and was knocked back, crying out in fear. The entire group of nobles, who had been arguing clamorously, were startled and gaped. Arisha's youthful yet powerful voice echoed through the room. Why look so far? The smoke and dust from the explosion gradually cleared, revealing Arisha's small but imposing figure. The noble from before lay, flattened and motionless on the ground. Once the dust settled completely, Arisha's radiant face was fully visible. She smiled brightly and said, I'm right here. Inside the hall, everyone around murmured and whispered. One of them spoke up. Who dares to sit on the emperor's throne? Arisha sat majestically on the throne, arms crossed, looking down at them. One of them noticed something, stammering before finally getting the words out. Look at the hair. That platinum hair. It's just like His Majesty's. Moreover, the red eyes and gaze are exactly the same. So then, could this be Princess Arisha? Arisha sat on the throne, her face expressionless. She spoke up when someone recognized her. You're only realizing it now? It seems you're not very satisfied with me. Is there a problem? Suddenly, one of the nobles slammed his hand on the table in anger. The girl absolutely cannot become emperor. Absolutely not. He spoke in a fit of rage. Besides, aren't you just a princess in name only, imprisoned in the palace your whole life? How can a princess who has never left the palace become emperor? Arisha was annoyed, her face darkening. Who are you? Which family do you belong to? Her question made him freeze, unable to speak further. What? Arisha's annoyance was clear. She crossed her arms and asked sternly, I'm asking you your name. All the nobles there murmured amongst themselves, isn't she only 9 years old? She's only that age, but her presence is already this strong. His voice lowered, no longer daring to raise his head. He muttered, I am Marquis Dime Parang. Arisha's voice rang out immediately after he introduced himself. Marquis, is that all you can think of? I can't believe the imperial leaders are only at this level. Although she's only 9 years old, her commanding presence is just like her father's, truly intimidating. Everyone senses Arisha's demeanor, as if His Majesty were standing right behind her. Arisha rested her chin on her hand. Just because I'm an imprisoned princess, does that mean I don't have royal blood? Do you think I'll become a puppet emperor? Dime, startled, quickly clarified, No, your highness, that's not what we meant. One of them staring at her, muttered, overwhelmed by a 9-year-old. Useless. The man then stood up, bowed respectfully, and introduced himself. Arnold Hordep, of the Hordep ducal family, at your service, princess. Hordep looked up, frowning. Your Highness, in truth, we are only concerned about one thing, your competence. Arisha leaned forward, listening intently. The position of emperor carries immense responsibilities, and competence is essential. Therefore, appointing you as emperor without proof of your capabilities is simply unreasonable. Furthermore, more than just 1 or 2 regions have been severely damaged by the war. We need someone capable of handling this situation. Arisha, irritated by his rebuttal, rose from the throne as, "Oh, you're questioning my qualifications to be emperor." Having received the desired response, Hordep hastily replied, "Yes. Can you prove your competence?" But she didn't seem worried. For Arisha, nothing was difficult. Arisha snapped her fingers. A light flashed. Then, Hordep's feet lifted off the ground. Hordep, now suspended in midair, was taken aback. "Wait, what's happening?" Arisha explained, "You'll witness it firsthand and then inform the others." He then vanished before everyone's eyes. Everyone was stunned. Instantaneous teleportation? Impossible. I've never even heard of such a thing. Using high-level magic without a magic circle? Has there ever been such a talented mage in history? Another whispered to his neighbor, His Majesty also reached the rank of Sword Saint at that age, though he wasn't a mage. The other man replied, surprised, they're so alike. Truly remarkable individuals. Isabella, the handmaiden, who had witnessed the magic, looked up at the throne with newfound reverence. Your Highness. Meanwhile, at a village on the Empire's border, the two of them reappeared. Arisha felt the magical energy within her. That it's been a while since I used magic, so I was a little worried, but it seems fine. I thought I'd lose my mana after being reborn. How did it come back? Hordep, startled by the desolate surroundings, asked, Your Highness, is this a village on the border? She replied, Yes, I intentionally chose a location near the border. The damage is severe. Hordep looked at the starving villagers. What do you plan to do here? She approached them to assess the situation. Arisha touched the dry earth. Let's see. She blew gently on the dust in her hand. Then Arisha commanded, From now on, with a wave of my hand, the injured will be completely healed, and the collapsed houses will be restored to their original state. The scarce food will become abundant, enough to feed tens of thousands of people with plenty left over. Everything will become plentiful. Arisha stood before the people and performed her magic. The people, witnessing this scene, couldn't help but be astonished. Even Hordep exclaimed in disbelief. Then, a golden light enveloped Arisha. She vanished before the people, leaving them stunned and wondering. What was that? A god. But those things, those were Arisha's miracles. They immediately returned to the palace hall. When she and Hordep returned, everyone was surprised that you're back. Your Highness, where have you been? Arisha stood before them, arms crossed, and declared haughtily, I've finished repairing the area near the border. They all wore expressions of astonishment. Yes, it's unbelievable. The war just ended yesterday, and you've already finished the repairs. One of them, unable to believe their ears, asked Hordep for confirmation. Tell me, is it true? Even Hordep, with a surprised look, recounted it's true. Her Highness repaired everything in an instant. Arisha quietly watched them discuss amongst themselves, saying things like, Her Highness just waved her hand, and the collapsed houses were restored, and food overflowed everywhere. Then she turned to leave, thinking, why make such a fuss over something so trivial? Suddenly, she glanced over and saw Isabella standing there, looking at her with admiration. Seeing her, Arisha smiled. Arisha turned to address everyone. I didn't intend to show you just this much and then force you to acknowledge me. So, look forward to it. I'll show you even more. Then she turned and left. Arisha and Isabella walked along the hallway together. Arisha glanced at Isabella's expression and thought, it seems Isabella is very surprised. Well, it's understandable, but Isabella walked silently, saying nothing. 9 years ago, everyone gossiped when Arisha was born. A princess should be born into boundless happiness. But the Empress's death caused her father to become cold towards her, and the Empire resented her too. What did this small life do wrong? I hope you won't be lonely and think you'll live a solitary life. I will dedicate my entire life to being your family. I've been by your Highness's side for 9 years now. Isabella thought, so I believe I'm the one who understands her Highness the best. That expression just now was one I've never seen before. I'm so confused that I don't know if this is the princess I know. Is Her Highness intentionally hiding her power? If Her Highness isn't ordinary, then Suddenly, Arisha took her hand. Isabella looked down in surprise and saw Arisha smiling at her. Isabella felt a warm current flowing through her body. Arisha suddenly spoke. Isabella, are you surprised about this? Isabella smiled happily. Your Highness. Arisha was a little surprised when she called her. Isabella looked out the window beside them. The weather is beautiful, isn't it? Then the two looked at each other again. They smiled happily, and Arisha thought to herself, yes, no matter who your Highness is, I will stay by your side as long as I live. Thank you, Isabella. The gentle morning sunlight streamed in, painting streaks of light on the walls, filling the room with vitality. After that day, everyone bowed before Arisha and hurriedly restored the dilapidated princess's palace. The page of the book turned as gently as a breeze. Arisha sat upright at the table, engrossed in her book. Not only that, but she had also begun attending royal classes. Because she had to start all the lessons she hadn't learned before at once. She was forced to absorb all the knowledge. If she were an ordinary child, she probably wouldn't be able to stand it. But for Arisha, this wasn't too difficult. A sudden knock interrupted Arisha's concentration, and she called out for the person to enter. Sedelt, after entering, bowed politely too. Arisha. He had been appointed as the emperor's aide at the age of 17, and for 7 years, he had been by the emperor's side like his right hand. Arisha stared at Sedelt and thought to herself, even serving an emperor known for being strict and demanding, he has endured until now without being beheaded. Sedelt said, I greet you, your Highness. Arisha replied softly, all right, Sedelt. He reported, as you instructed, I have ensured the emperor's death will not be leaked. Arisha, upon hearing this, looked down at her book and pondered. In this still unstable situation, revealing the emperor's death will not be beneficial. Then to Sedelt, all right, it's best to avoid any unnecessary complications. Sedelt paused for a few seconds. The funeral will be postponed until it can no longer be delayed. Arisha asked if Debian had arrived. Sedelt politely replied, yes, your Highness, the scholar is in the reception room. After receiving the answer, she exclaimed, so early? Tell him to come in. The door slowly opened. Debian Brooke, a mage from the magic tower but of noble birth, Arisha's magic tutor, entered with a bright smile. Greetings, your Highness. Arisha walked up to him and coldly asked, why are you so punctual? Debian responded dejectedly, that's sad. Why would you say that? After both of them were seated, he shared, I always dedicate myself to your lessons. Arisha only hummed coldly in response. Debian quickly corrected himself. Well, starting today. He opened the materials he had prepared beforehand and introduced, this is a magic equation that for many years, even scholars and mages from the magic tower haven't been able to solve. Arisha crossed her arms and frowned, staring at the document. Then, she said in a bored tone, this? Debian chuckled. Here you go. She took it and said to him, it seems like you're not even thinking about teaching me. Then asked, you just want to reap the benefits, right? Debian burst out laughing heartily. I wouldn't dare teach your Highness, so please answer quickly. Without a word, Arisha incinerated the document in a flash. Debian froze, clutching his head and exclaiming, no, no. Arisha didn't even look at him, turning her face away with a sharp, blade-like scoff escaping her lips. Debian exclaimed, oh, but thankfully, I understand His Highness's personality well. He pulled out another scroll and said with a triumphant grin, so I prepared a copy beforehand. You can see how seriously I take this lesson, right? Arisha sighed with Lida and ordered Debian, give it here. She sat down at the desk and diligently wrote something. Debian stared at Arisha with admiring, sparkling eyes, his cheeks flushed as if he had just stepped out of a dream he didn't want to wake from. He remarked, but the emperor was also very skilled in this area, wasn't he? It's only natural, since he was one of the best swordsmen in the world. Arisha replied impassively, a person like that died in the war. Debian exclaimed, that's why the news of His Majesty's death caused such an uproar. He continued, I heard that the enemy emperor used black magic. Arisha paused, taken aback. Debian immediately stopped, as if realizing he had gone too far. He coughed and clarified, according to my sources, that is. He continued to share, during the battle between His Majesty and the enemy emperor, a terrifying power suddenly surged towards His Majesty. and a huge explosion occurred there. Arisha asked in surprise, "Occurred there?" Debian replied, "I heard there was nothing left where His Majesty was standing." He put on a mournful expression and emphasized, "Nothing at all." Debian continued, "The search party also set out, but couldn't find anything, so everyone assumed he had died." Arisha thought to herself, even if he was a swordsman, he was still human. If he suffered from black magic that corroded both his soul and body, then, she uttered, the probability of survival is almost zero. After a while, Isabella cheerfully wished Arisha good night. Arisha agreed and returned the sentiment. "You too, Isabella." Under the dim light, Arisha lay still as if she had fallen asleep long ago. But a moment later, her whole body jerked, and she sat up abruptly, her face filled with alarm as if she had suddenly remembered something. Arisha's eyes were fixed on the paper on the table. She gently lifted a finger and used magic to manipulate the paper. Arisha pondered, "I feel a little guilty towards Isabella, but if I want to become emperor, I have to do something." Arisha frowned as she read the contents of the paper, the case of the missing children. She mused, "This case is a bit suspicious, isn't it?" The paper read, "Case of missing children. Currently, 6 children are missing from Oho village near the palace. The number of crimes targeting children is increasing. Below is the list of missing persons. Thomas, Zick Stugel, Nella Carvin." Arisha looked outside through the window. "Is it this late already?" A playful smirk appeared on her lips. "Walking around looking like a child at this hour is a bit strange, but it's also the perfect time to kidnap a child." White hair flashed, and a spatial vortex appeared in the middle of the room. The scene shifted outside. The streets were now submerged in sleep. Amidst the encompassing darkness, a flash of light flickered in a hidden corner. Arisha looked around. She stood alone in the middle of the deserted street, only the chilling wind rushing past. Arisha hummed thoughtfully. While casting a spell, she chuckled softly. "This is the only way." A circle with brilliant magical streams appeared. The magical streams radiated outwards, weaving through the city and even into the vast, seemingly uninhabited forests. Suddenly, a strange house materialized amidst the trees. Arisha exclaimed, "This should be it." 3 burly men stood guard in front of the house. Arisha gasped, "Found them." The magical streams quickly infiltrated the building, that if my hunch is correct. 2 guards stood sternly before a suspicious room. Inside, a group of children, dirty and in ragged clothes, sat huddled together. Arisha's eyes lit up. She smiled radiantly, having found them. Arisha immediately used a spatial vortex to enter. A flash of light appeared before the cell. Arisha suddenly appeared amidst the faint light, her posture majestic, like a descending goddess. A little boy gaped and an angel. Arisha gently gestured for the children to be quiet. Then, with a bright smile, she reassured them, "Quiet now, I'll save you." The children were imprisoned in a dilapidated room, cobwebs clinging to the corners, illuminated only by a flickering, yellowed light bulb that seemed on the verge of burning out. Arisha looked around, examining the cells. She thought to herself, the report mentioned 6. Seems like they caught more. The children looked up at Arisha with pitiful eyes. She approached and gripped the iron bars of a cell. Magical streams enveloped Arisha, spreading out and striking each cell door, causing them to rattle and burst open one by one. Looking at a pair of siblings huddled in a corner, she speculated, are they planning to enslave these children? A loud crash echoed from the hallway. Arisha's lips immediately turned downwards, her gaze becoming icy, as if capable of piercing the night. The panicked kidnappers ran in, shouting, "What was that noise? Why are the doors open?" Upon seeing Arisha standing in the middle of the room, they yelled, "How did you get in here?" Arisha didn't say a word. She simply sighed in exasperation and snapped her fingers. The 3 kidnappers were instantly bound by magical chains, their bodies trembling as they were forced to kneel on the floor as if pulled down by an invisible force. They cried out in terror, "Let us go. What is this?" Arisha looked annoyed. That's noisy. She turned to the children and called, "Everyone, come on. Let's go home." But the children didn't move, only staring at Arisha with wide, pale eyes, startling her slightly. "What's wrong? You're like scared kittens." A little girl raised her hand and explained, "Miss, I don't know the way." Arisha brought a hand to her chin, lost in thought. 2 seconds later, she snapped her fingers as if she had found a solution. In a blink, Arisha and the children were outside. She pointed to an arrow above them and asked, "If you follow this arrow, can you all get home?" The children then held hands and left, not forgetting to turn around and wave goodbye to Arisha. She kindly reminded them, be careful. After everyone had safely departed, she thoughtfully analyzed the situation. Actually, this forest isn't very deep. Why couldn't the villagers find the children? Is there something unusual going on? The scene shifted to the royal palace. The nobles were discussing last night's events. They were skeptical. Did the princess really solve the series of child disappearances? One of them slammed his hand on the table and asked with an indignant expression, so the people currently imprisoned are the culprits behind the kidnappings, right? Someone replied, that's right. They're currently being interrogated to find out who's behind it all. Dime turned to Herdep and asked, Marquis, why are you so happy? He shared, of course I'm happy. What else? The princess solved a huge problem. Someone expressed confusion. Could it be you're still eyeing the throne? Herdep slammed his hand on the table and asked, hasn't the country been in chaos ever since the war broke out? He continued seriously, but the princess has personally taken care of everything. How amazing she is. Someone there replied, I know. Since it's like this, is there even a need for the princess to prove her abilities anymore? The room suddenly fell silent, and everyone looked saddened. Now, the Empire had a new son. The scene transitioned to the prison, where the kidnappers were being interrogated. They were bound hand and foot, kneeling on the floor. Arisha glared at them and ordered, all right, kidnappers, confess. What is your connection to the illegal slave trade? One of them quickly glanced away and denied everything. I don't know what you're talking about. Arisha's face darkened. I'm giving you one last chance. Tell me everything. I'll find out anyway. Seeing this, the kidnappers were terrified, sweating profusely. One of them spoke up. We can't reveal anything. If we do, we'll face something worse than death. He fearfully confessed, you don't know how terrifying that woman is. Before he could finish his sentence, his eyes froze wide, as if being choked. His chest suddenly exploded, spraying blood, leaving Arisha stunned. She instinctively stepped back. Arisha was astonished. He's dead. But just 2 seconds later, the corners of her lips curled up, revealing amusement. Things just got more interesting, haven't they? From the horizon, the bright sun shone everywhere, making everything seem to awaken in a symphony of light. Arisha lowered her head and walked silently down the street. A thought flashed through her mind, this time, instead of taking the form of a child. Arisha's entire body emitted powerful energy waves as she walked forward confidently. In the blink of an eye, Arisha's transformation was complete. Dressed in a cheongsam, she thought, I'll use this form for easier infiltration. Streams of people passed by Arisha. She just stood there, her eyes vacant. A suspicious building appeared, making Arisha wonder, is that the big casino at the end of the street? Arisha mused, analyzing the memories she'd extracted from the kidnapper. According to them, the underground auction beneath the casino was where the illegal slave trades were taking place. What was their reason for avoiding the royal family's eyes? If she could catch the woman behind it all, she would find out. Suddenly, a figure in a black cloak brushed past, startling her. The person softly apologized. Arisha smiled dismissively. She suddenly froze, her eyes widening in surprise. This is? Arisha wondered dark magic? Moreover, it was mixed with that person's own magic. She decided to ignore it. It wasn't her business anyway. Arisha continued walking, heading for the entrance. At the casino entrance, 2 guards were checking the person in front of her. We will be checking for magical tools. She scoffed internally. That clumsy method? Arisha smirked. They wouldn't be able to detect her magic. Just as she thought, she quickly passed through and entered. The atmosphere inside was incredibly lively, filled with laughter and the pleasant sound of cards being slapped onto tables. Arisha was drawn to the sounds. With this, we could participate in the auction, right? A casino employee replied with a smile, of course. I worked very hard to find this. Arisha thought, in surprise, a golden ticket. Then she conjured one. Arisha approached the employee and said, I'd like you to guide me. He was a little surprised, but quickly agreed. The casino employee carefully scrutinized the golden ticket with a magnifying glass. Arisha expressed her displeasure. Are you planning to wait until the auction is over before guiding me? That's not the case. I'll guide you now. They both then entered a room with the words, no entry without authorization above the door. The casino employee bowed at a 45-degree angle and respectfully ushered Arisha into the elevator. Standing in the elevator, she smiled as she looked down through the window. After escorting Arisha to a lavish room, the casino employee announced, we've arrived. I hope you have a pleasant time. It was the auction venue directly below the casino floor. The corners of Arisha's lips curled up. She thought to herself, this is going to be fun. Inside, nobles were arriving at their seats, waiting for the auction to begin. Arisha quietly walked behind them, quickly reaching her destination. She stood before a room and silently used magic to become invisible. She thought, before the auction starts, I'll see what's inside. Arisha Zelopacia walked past the staff, carrying items to be auctioned, her eyes catching something. Arisha Zelopacia didn't say anything, only silently recognized the items. These were items that couldn't be bought unless one belonged to a ducal family. Then Arisha stood before some other items considered quite valuable. There are even royal items here. Suddenly, a woman's voice caught Arisha's attention. "Excuse me, Count. That's Kira Reventris. She's talking to a fat Count," Arisha observed. "The child traffickers have already been apprehended by the royal guard," the Count replied. He sighed, seemingly displeased. "Unlike you, they use such inferior methods." Kira simply smirked and responded, "Well, the war is over, so it seems the Empire has bolstered its manpower. Besides, my brother has prepared something quite interesting today. Please, make yourself comfortable." Arisha Zelopacia eavesdropped on their conversation. She focused on Kira, thinking, red hair? Is she the one behind all this? As Kira finished speaking with the Count, she turned to retrieve something. Kira Reventris returned with a small vial containing a purple liquid. The fat Count's eyes lit up and his demeanor brightened. He eagerly asked Kira, "No, what does your brother do exactly? How can he provide such a precious thing every month?" Kira just smiled faintly and replied, "I'm afraid I can't disclose that." Arisha continued to watch them as Kira placed the vial on the table. "I understand. As long as I have this precious thing, it's all that matters," the Count said. Leaving the room, Arisha deactivated her invisibility magic and stepped out. She picked up the vial of purple liquid and examined it. Her eyes darkened as she realized what it was. This is a forbidden drug. Arisha couldn't understand how Kira had obtained a narcotic that only dark mages could create. Kaisenberger. This stuff is incredibly rare among humans. Dark magic is a power that gnaws at life and soul, so by the will of the gods, it's completely forbidden to humans. But even dark mages can't easily create Kaisenberger unless they're true masters. The auction was scheduled to begin in a few minutes. Arisha Zelopacia scowled, still holding the vial. Unless a supremely powerful dark mage was born by some stroke of luck. That is, following that thought, an announcement echoed from the auction room. "All attendees, please take your seats." Arisha narrowed her eyes, her voice laced with danger. "This is a bigger game than I thought." Inside the opulent auction room, attendees stood on different levels, waiting for the proceedings to begin. Arisha stood on a higher level, observing the scene below. A moment later, Kira Reventris emerged from the wings and took center stage. "We extend our gratitude and greetings to all our esteemed guests." She confidently introduced herself that "I am the organizer of this auction, Kira Reventris." Without further ado, Kira went straight to the main event. Yes, I know you've all been waiting. Let's begin with our first item. A small box containing a glittering, luxurious piece of jewelry was presented. This is a ruby sculpture blessed by the Lord. Arisha frowned, recognizing the item. Isn't that a treasure of the Loretta Empire? She began to piece together the item's origins. This is the heart of the 12th bell, a treasure of the Loretta Empire. Even if it's a small empire, it's still a legitimate nation. Auctioning off an empire's treasure? That's insane. Kira raised a microphone and addressed the crowd. Now the bidding will begin. The attendees below began to call out their bids. 2,000 gold, 2,500 gold, 3,000 gold. Arisha watched from above. Bidding was underway. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Let's begin." Suddenly, the lights in the room went out. Everyone was startled and confused. Several people exclaimed, "What's going on? What happened?" Kira Reventris was also bewildered. She looked around and quickly reassured everyone. "Hold on. It seems there's been a slight problem." She continued, "We'll resolve this quickly. Please wait a moment." Just as she finished speaking, the lights slowly came back on in an unexpected way. Everyone looked around in confusion, murmuring, "What's going on? Who is that?" Arisha, somehow already holding the piece of jewelry, said, "No matter how weak that empire is, it's still an empire. Stealing an empire's treasure, you're quite bold." Kira face paled. She forced a laugh and asked, Who are you?" Arisha simply looked at her and smiled, still holding the jewelry. In a flash, she pulled something out and slowly replied, "Who am I?" Then, A paper filled with writing appeared in Arisha's hand. She answered Kirisari's question. I'm someone from the Imperial Palace here to arrest those holding an illegal auction. The nobles inside were terrified and wanted to flee. That it's someone from the Imperial Palace. We have to run. They began to run chaotically, shouting, I don't want to be taken away. Arisha just smirked calmly. You were so eager to get in, it won't be so easy to get out. Just as they were about to escape, magic suddenly appeared, blocking the door, surprising everyone. What's this? The obese count rudely shoved an employee aside and yelled, Look, she's obviously still young. He approached Arisha and scolded, You're trying to impersonate someone from the Imperial Palace to ruin this auction, aren't you? Then the obese count snatched the paper from her hand. He angrily said, bringing a forgery and interfering so arrogantly. Arisha repeated, a forgery? The obese count continued to yell, You think I don't know? The emperor is dead now. Arisha Zelopacia remained silent and looked at him. A moment later, she spoke in a terrifyingly calm voice that stunned the count. I can't believe there's someone as reckless and fearless as you. Arisha reached up to pull down her hood. She pulled down her hood, revealing her white hair, and calmly replied, Currently, no one in the Imperial Palace can give their seal. Even if you're a count from some unknown family, you surely must know that only those of the royal family have platinum hair. The count, now terrified, stammered, Platinum hair. He collapsed to the ground, unable to speak properly. Kirisari went to help him up. Arisha Lopexia smirked. What a pity. She said sarcastically, There's still one person left in the Imperial Palace who can give their seal. Kirisari Reventress looked at Arisha Lopexia with fear. Arisha simply looked back at her with satisfaction. At the magnificent palace, Arisha entered a room from outside, her demeanor quite calm. Suddenly, a voice called out, attracting Arisha's attention. Your Highness. Immediately afterward, Isabella ran to embrace Arisha tightly and asked worriedly, Where did you go? Arisha hugged Isabella and replied, It's nothing, just... The next part she muttered to herself, I just raided an illegal auction and arrested everyone. Isabella held her hand and asked, Your Highness, what about me? Isabella quickly expressed her feelings. Lately, I've been feeling uneasy, making Arisha worry. Arisha frowned, worried, her voice slightly raised. What? Why? What happened? Did someone dare to bother you? Isabella sighed and complained. There's someone I've served for the past 9 years who goes to dangerous places without any escort. Arisha realized she was talking about herself and could only chuckle awkwardly and look away. So it's about me, Isabella said, seemingly sulking. At least you could tell me where you went. Seeing Isabella's attitude, Arisha could only comfort her. I know. She sighed and replied, I'll definitely tell you next time. Isabella smiled with satisfaction. You promise? Then Isabella told Arisha that someone was looking for her. By the way, your aide has come looking for your highness. It seems like you want to talk about something. Arisha guessed Sedelt at the library. Sedelt, inside the room, saw Arisha arrive and rose from his chair, respectfully saying, Your Highness, you've returned. Arisha simply walked in and looked at Sedelt, asking, You were looking for me? He replied, Everyone is currently waiting for your highness in the meeting room. She sat down on a chair and wondered me. What? Sedelt quickly answered her question. It seems they have something they want to say to your highness. Arisha realized the reason. Is it about my coronation? It makes sense. I've been demonstrating my abilities a lot lately. Suddenly, Arisha asked him a question, taking him by surprise. Sedelt, what about you? Arisha turned to ask Sedelt, her eyes radiating the aura of someone from the Imperial Palace. Will you follow me? He was still surprised, unable to answer her question immediately. Arisha watched Sedelt thinking and silently assessed. Until now, Sedelt has always obeyed my orders without a word. But I don't know if that's proof of his loyalty or not. After all, he's the Emperor's man, and the Emperor personally chose him to be by my side. Arisha looked away from him, turning her gaze upwards and softly saying, I can tell whether you're being truthful or lying. So, tell me the truth. She thought to herself, I need to keep an eye on him. A moment later, Sedelt suddenly knelt down and replied, My duty is to maintain peace in the Empire. He spoke respectfully, therefore, I will follow and serve the son of the Empire. Sedelt's eyes were filled with trust. Towards Arisha, Arisha simply smiled gently, satisfied with his answer. He hadn't disappointed her. She said, Good, that's enough. Arisha changed the subject. Anyway, there's something I have to do. Sedelt spoke up. Please give your orders, your highness. Arisha recalled the words of the obese count at the auction and voiced her suspicion. It seems there's a servant accepting bribes and leaking internal affairs of the imperial palace. Sedelt immediately took responsibility. That was my oversight. Arisha jumped down from her chair and said, "No, Sedelt, there's no need to apologize for this. Right?" She turned, her gaze cold as she commanded. "I've captured the count and locked him in a cell. So you just need to make him reveal who received the money." He replied, "Understood." Arisha left the room and went to where Sedelt was waiting. Now I must go to where everyone has been waiting for me. In another building, the nobles were engaged in a lively discussion. Hearing the door open, everyone looked to see who it was. It was Arisha slowly entering the room. All the nobles in the room stood up to greet her. "It is an honor to meet you, princess." Despite her young age, Arisha wore an unusually calm expression. She sat down, resting her chin on her hand, and asked, "What do you wish to say?" Anold spoke first, addressing the ministers of the imperial court. Hordep spoke formally and politely. "May a new sun dawn and dispel the darkness that shrouds the empire. Please become a radiant sun, illuminating and protecting this empire." Then all the other nobles echoed in unison, "Please become a radiant sun, illuminating and protecting this empire." Arisha remained silent, looking away. She closed her eyes. Then she called out, "Minister of Finance." He stood up and replied, "Yes, Your Highness." Arisha ordered, "Prepare for the coronation." That evening, after the meeting concluded, the sunset painted the sky red. Inside the palace, Isabella was brushing Arisha's hair. Suddenly, Arisha looked up, and Isabella, noticing, gently asked, "Your Highness, are you very tired?" Looking at Isabella, Arisha recalled memories of her care from childhood. When she was imprisoned by the emperor and everyone turned their backs on her, Isabella was the only one who protected her. Arisha softly called, "Isabella." She quickly replied, "Yes, Your Highness." Arisha told her, "I will become emperor." As far as Arisha knew, this place was nothing more than a giant prison, and Isabella was the only one who cared for her. Isabella's warm hand clasped Arisha's as she softly said, "I always believe that Your Highness's decisions are right." She smiled gently and trustingly. "Oh, please, follow the path you wish to take." Arisha blushed, thinking, "She's my only family." Arisha smiled happily and said, "Thank you, Isabella." Then, Isabella declared confidently, "Isn't that a given? If anyone opposes Your Highness's will, I'll be the first to jump out and punch them." Arisha was flustered by her description and tried to stifle her laughter, but failed, giggling happily. The next morning, inside the palace, the day of the coronation had arrived. Isabella draped a luxurious robe over Arisha. Admiring her beauty, "Your Highness, you look absolutely stunning." Arisha, feeling smug, turned to Isabella and replied, "Of course, who do you think I am?" Isabella continued to meticulously adjust the bow on Arisha's robe. Arisha suddenly spoke. "Isabella." She responded affectionately, "Yes, Your Highness? Is something wrong?" Arisha looked up, her eyes filled with tenderness. "From now on, I will make you even happier." Isabella felt a flicker of emotion at Arisha's happy words and replied radiantly, "Taking care of Your Highness already brings me so much joy." Arisha was delighted by Isabella's words. Isabella spoke up, breaking the tender moment. "Your Highness, everything is prepared." With renewed confidence, Arisha replied, "Then let us proceed." Walking towards the coronation hall, she reflected on the past. After 9 years shrouded in darkness, I finally step into the light. Entering with an air of majesty, Arisha was greeted respectfully. "We are honored to meet you, princess." Arisha seemed more mature than ever. The servants bowed deeply to welcome the princess. As Arisha ascended the steps, she thought to herself, "After today, I will be addressed as emperor, not princess." Arisha bowed before the priest and continued her inner monologue. "Today is the day." The priest placed a hand on Arisha's head. Her thoughts flowed. "Finally, I become the new son of this empire." The priest began the ceremony. "Today, the first priest of God shall convey his will." He raised the crown. The new son of the empire, the symbol of the emperor. A loud crash drew Arisha's attention. The doors exploded inward, and white smoke billowed, filling the space and obscuring vision. Debris flew everywhere, creating chaos. Arisha and the priest were protected by a shield. Arisha glanced back, thinking, not everyone can pull that off. Footsteps slowly approached. Robertus, his face dark, spoke in a displeased tone. "While I was away," he continued, looking towards Arisha, "I'm curious to see who dares to covet my position." The atmosphere grew oppressive with the aura of malice emanating from Robertus. With a look of utter contempt, he said, "So, it's this face." A servant spoke in confusion. No." He continued, still startled, "Your Majesty, your Imperial Majesty." The priest bowed to Robertus anxiously. The interruption irritated Orisha, who thought, these people, seriously. "And what about the new son?" Orisha stood up and said, "Oh my, is that father?" She continued, "I apologize, this is the first time I've met you, so I didn't recognize you." Robertus scowled and replied. Orisha greeted him again, more formally. "It is a pleasure to meet you, father. I am Princess Orisha, and I offer you my greetings." Robertus walked past Orisha, indifferently addressing the servants without acknowledging her bow. "Clean this place up." Orisha straightened up. Suddenly, she muttered, "What a terrible personality." The crown, knocked aside, fell to the floor and rolled towards Orisha. Orisha turned back with an innocent look. "Oh dear, did I just say that out loud?" Robertus, enraged, bellowed, "You dare!" His eyes burned red, his sword pressed against Orisha's neck. With a menacing tone, he continued, "Defy the Emperor's orders, leave the palace, and now covet my position?" Orisha, fearless and calm, replied, "The Empire is in chaos. As the princess, I cannot sit idly by." Robertus continued, "Are you so foolish that you do not fear death?" Orisha laughed. "Father, you're quite humorous." Gently pushing the sword away, she said, "If what you say is true." Orisha's expression turned serious. "Then that blade would have already slit my throat." Orisha continued, "The servants below are terrified by this scene. You look exhausted after such a long battle. Have you considered stepping down and resting?" Robertus, provoked by Orisha's defiance, responded, "It seems you truly desire this blade at your throat." He abruptly sheathed his sword. Orisha bowed to Robertus once more. "If that is your wish, then it can't be helped. I shall take my leave for today and return tomorrow, your Majesty." But inwardly she thought, "Lies, like I'd ever come back." Robertus, after hearing this, spat out harsh words, "Get out of my sight." Later that night, in Orisha's bedroom, she was lost in thought. My power was clearly diminished in front of the Emperor. Recalling the morning's events, "You dare defy the Emperor's orders, leave the palace, and now covet my position? Have you considered stepping down and resting?" She was still frustrated by her father's words. "What does it all mean?" she wondered. Orisha wondered, "What does it all mean?" Isabella had quietly approached and sat beside Orisha. "Your Highness," she said softly, a hint of sadness in her voice. "Are you all right?" Orisha, confused, replied, "Huh? What do you mean?" Isabella looked down. "You must be feeling troubled. After all, you are family." Orisha seemed to understand Isabella's sadness. She brightened and reassured Isabella. "I'm fine, Isabella. 9 years have been like this. So how could things change in a single instance?" A smile finally graced Isabella's lips. Isabella suggested, "Your Highness, let me tell you an interesting story." Orisha, curious, asked, "An interesting story?" Isabella cheerfully replied, "Yes." Isabella began, "I heard this story when I was little. Do you know about the White Witch in a legend?" Orisha, taken aback by the story, thought to herself, "What?" Isabella, immersed in the tale, recounted it with great enthusiasm. "They say the White Witch lives on the moon. So, if we pray earnestly during a full moon, she will make our wishes come true." Isabella smiled after finishing the story. "So, Your Highness, don't worry." Orisha blushed, embarrassed. "What?" Isabella prayed that Orisha's wish would be granted. "Every full moon, I will pray earnestly to the White Witch. Oh, Witch, please grant Your Highness the ability to do whatever she desires." Orisha replied gratefully, "Yes, thank you." A strange girl, seemingly pleading, said, "Please listen to me. Grant me someone like him." Dawn broke, and Orisha woke up in a daze. She looked out the window, thinking, "I think I dreamt something." At mealtime, Orisha was still feeling uneasy. "This is so frustrating." Isabella spoke up. "Your Highness," Orisha muttered to herself. "I can almost remember, but not quite." Beside her, a very flustered Isabella repeated, "Your Highness." Isabella placed a plate of pastries on the table and continued, "What are you thinking about?" "You need to eat." Interrupted, Orisha returned to reality. "Oh, right. I should eat." Isabella asked Orisha, "Is something the matter, Your Highness? Did you have a nightmare last night?" Orisha, looking blank, didn't answer. She thought to herself, "Right? Why should I even think about those things?" Orisha called out, "Isabella, Isabella." Isabella gently replied, "Do you need something?" Orisha's expression brightened with a hint of excitement. "Let's go out." She thought, "I have to treat Isabella to something delicious." something really delicious. They arrived in the bustling town, crowded with people. A golden light transported Arisha and Isabella to their destination. Isabella was astonished, and she exclaimed, "Your Highness, that's amazing. I heard you get teleportation sickness when you first learn to teleport, but it seems like that's not the case." Arisha brushed it off, explaining to Isabella, "That's only for beginners." Isabella stammered nervously, "But what should I do? I didn't bring any money." Arisha pulled a pouch of coins from a robe. Arisha smiled brightly and gestured to Isabella, "Don't worry, I've prepared everything." Isabella asked Arisha in surprise, "Is this also one of your Highness's powers, or where did it come from?" Arisha replied with a haughty air, "It's nothing." As she spoke, Arisha recalled, "Inside the royal palace vault, as a precaution against the last incident. I took it from the royal vault." She thought smugly, "I deserve a full reward for all my efforts." Arisha said, extending her hand, "Isabella, it must have been difficult living in poverty for 9 years in the royal palace, right?" She continued excitedly, "Today, you can have anything you want. I'll spoil you." Isabella was now feeling very happy. Isabella smiled brightly and replied, "Yes, let's go, Your Highness." Then the two held hands and walked together in the warm atmosphere. Entering the shop, everything looked luxurious, especially the gowns, which looked very splendid. The glittering gold jewelry looked elegant. The staff began to greet them warmly. "Welcome, we're the Gloria clothing store." Arisha didn't say a word, only presenting the royal insignia, causing the attendant's jaw to drop. Sweating, the attendant invited her to the VIP lounge. Isabella whispered into Arisha's ear with curiosity, "Your Highness, what did you give the staff member?" Arisha readily replied, "The royal crest attached to my father's armor." Isabella was a little surprised, and she said, "Is it all right for you to bring that here?" Suddenly, Arisha turned to the side, chuckling to herself with a somewhat amused thought, "I wonder what his reaction will be when he finds out." The attendants brought out clothes and jewelry. Both Arisha and Isabella tried them on, looking very beautiful. They continued trying things on in high spirits. A long list of bills had been sent to Robertus. Settle began to speak. The bill should be sent to the Imperial Palace, while these deliveries should be transferred to the Princess's palace. Settle continued with a worried expression. "So, in conclusion, no." Suddenly, Robertus interrupted. "A portion of the gold in the Imperial Palace vault has disappeared. The royal insignia on my armor has also vanished without a trace." He continued in a grumpy tone, "And now, another extravagant bill has been sent to the Imperial Palace." Settle bowed and replied, "Yes, that's correct." Robertus paused, thinking to himself, "There are at least 20 locks on the vault. How could she get in without a scratch and take the gold?" Settle continued to watch Robertus intently. Settle had a bad feeling. He spoke up, "I'll go outside." From outside came a guard and Isabella. The guard announced, "I have something to report, Your Majesty." The guard continued, "The princess wishes to have tea with you." Robertus's face darkened, and he said indifferently, "I refuse." Isabella spoke with concern. "Then Her Highness will be very upset." Settle thought to himself, "Doesn't she know the princess she serves?" Settle closed his eyes and sighed. He was startled when he opened his eyes. Robertus had vanished abruptly. He could only exclaim, "Your Majesty," and then again louder, "Your Majesty." The scene in the quiet garden was picturesque. Robertus was slightly taken aback to find himself here instead of in his office. The clear lake shimmered in the light, a gentle breeze causing the leaves to flutter. Arisha's soft voice rang out. "It's a beautiful day, isn't it?" Robertus stood silently beside Arisha, who was enjoying the weather. Arisha lifted her teacup and took a sip with relish. Then she beamed at Robertus and softly said, "Since you refused tea, I prepared this picnic." Robertus remained silent, offering no reply. He knelt down beside Arisha. His face contorted with disgust, and his voice became harsh. "What are you doing?" Arisha slowly stood up and replied calmly, "Perhaps, being the emperor, you're uncomfortable sitting on the ground?" Arisha began to pull at the cloth on the ground. She twirled around a few times, transforming it into a more elegant table and chairs. She asked Robertus, "How about this?" Robertus, now calmer, asked Arisha, "Why haven't you left yet?" Arisha rested her chin on her hand and looked at him as she replied, "What do you mean?" Robertus said irritably, "You have the power to do so. You must know that staying here won't change anything." Arisha remained completely calm, replying, "I have nowhere else to go. This is my home." Harsh words spilled from Robertus again. "Don't you think I'll kill you?" Arisha stirred the sugar in her teacup, a smile on her face as she said, "My father has no sense of humor." She continued confidently, "Do you really think you're capable of it? Which is why you say that." Arisha continued to speak her mind. I'm not staying here to save my life, nor am I longing for my father's love. But Robertus's face was filled with nothing but hatred. Lifting her teacup, she took a calm sip. Arisha continued, looking at him indifferently. I'm tired of living like I'm already dead, tired of living in the same place every day. Robertus finally broke the silence. You've been living as if you were dead for the past 9 years, Arisha. She replied bluntly, but I don't like it. Ignoring Robertus, Arisha continued with more enthusiasm. Before, I didn't know the Empire had so many interesting things. Now that I know, I don't want to go back to how it was. Robertus's eyes darkened with a fierce look as he retorted, That's truly an eyesore. Arisha wasn't saddened by his words. She replied strongly, something that makes itself an eyesore like that. As she spoke, she moved him to a different spot. I wish I could just throw it away. Arisha's eyes drooped, as if carrying a troubled thought. Looking sadly at her own hand, Arisha thought back to her father's words from earlier. An eyesore? It's so obvious. If I get close to the Emperor, I can't control my mana. Her voice was soft, but it held a hint of pain. You should have killed me then, because from now on, I will eliminate the variables. Sunlight streamed through the ceiling, gently reflecting off the crystal chandelier. In the meeting room, a courtier spoke respectfully, Your Majesty, for the past 3 years, we haven't held a debutante ball in the Empire. We can't postpone it any longer, as there are those who have passed 16 years of age, but still haven't been introduced to high society. Sedelt, standing behind the Emperor, couldn't help but sweat as he listened. He glanced at the Emperor, thinking, a debutante ball? That's a very important event in the Empire. It's where young women are introduced to high society. Usually, when they turn 16, noble women are presented. But for the past 3 years, the Emperor's absence and the war have prevented the Empire from holding this event. The courtier continued, and through this debutante ball, we must make the aristocracy aware of the princess's existence. Robertus sat on his chair, his face serious as he listened. He understood the nobles' intentions very well. They wanted to force the princess to appear in public. Seeing the nobles' intentions towards the princess, Sedelt couldn't help but tense up, thinking, the war hasn't ended for long, and they dare to go against His Majesty's wishes. Robertus remained silent, seemingly lost in thought. A moment later, while the nobles were restlessly tense, he spoke slowly, startling them. The princess's debutante ball. Proceed with it. Seeing the Emperor agree to hold the debutante ball, Sedelt was surprised and turned to look at him. Robertus's cold, stern expression and blazing red eyes made it difficult for Sedelt to discern his emotions. At a palace, in a flower-filled garden, Arisha was enjoying tea with her nanny. Upon receiving the news that the Emperor wanted to hold a debutante ball for her, Arisha remained unfazed. While eating a pastry, she looked up and asked her nanny, a debutante ball? Isabella, her nanny, sitting beside her, replied excitedly, Yes, Your Highness. It seems it will be held in 2 weeks at the Imperial Palace. Arisha, her cheeks puffed out from chewing, looked at her nanny and asked, Do I absolutely have to attend? Hearing this, Isabella clasped her hands together and replied seriously, This banquet signifies victory, so you must attend. You haven't attended a debutante ball before. After speaking, she glanced around, checking if anyone was nearby. Seeing no one, Isabella moved closer to Arisha and lowered her voice. Besides, it seems His Majesty has already allowed the Empire to know about the existence of the telephone. Arisha chuckled softly, feigning agreement. Is that so? Although she said that, Arisha didn't really pay much attention to it, thinking, how could that be? Then she continued, Well then, we must attend. Seeing Arisha's indifference, Isabella abruptly stood up and slammed her hand on the table, causing the tea to ripple. Looking at Arisha, Isabella felt a bit indignant on her behalf, her words carrying a hint of reproach towards the Emperor. But isn't His Majesty being a bit unreasonable? Hearing Isabella's words, Arisha silently looked at her with a puzzled expression. Isabella, with a melancholic expression and eyes full of worry, said, There's so much to prepare, yet the announcement about the debutante ball is so close to the date. Isabella sat back down, composing herself, and sighed before continuing. What should we prepare first? The banquet or oh, right? As she spoke, she seemed to remember something and turned to ask Arisha, Oh, Your Highness hasn't learned to dance, have you? At the mention of dancing, Arisha asked blankly, Dank dash. Engineer? What? Isn't it enough to just do this? Seeing the princess so clueless about the ball, Isabella's heart filled with worry and determination. She thought, I will teach you everything. Time passed. Princess Arisha's debutante ball, 14. The schedule was incredibly tight, only within 2 weeks. Nanny Isabella carefully styled Arisha's hair, and after a while, she looked at the princess with pride, as if looking at a masterpiece. To prepare for the ball, they started with preparing jewelry and dresses, followed by lessons on basic banquet etiquette, along with daily dance lessons. Arisha's dance steps were a bit unsteady, and she was exhausted from having so much to do, causing resentment towards the emperor to build up in her heart. I'm going to die of exhaustion. Did the emperor deliberately arrange this? Countess Zinur, Arisha's dance instructor, gently tapped her folding fan against her hand and said with a gentle smile, "Your Highness, time is running out, so you must focus." Being reminded, Arisha tried to concentrate on dancing with Zinur as her partner, practicing with her. After practicing for a while, Arisha stopped to rest. Nanny Isabella supported her while praising, "Your Highness, truly nothing is too difficult for you." Zinur also approached and offered her compliments. "Actually, I was very worried because there was so little time, but as expected, Your Highness is more skilled than I thought." Despite the praise, Arisha remained calm and replied, "You're too kind." Zinur changed the subject, smiling gently at Arisha and asking, "But Your Highness, have you decided who your escort will be?" "Escort?" Arisha asked, puzzled. Seeing that Arisha didn't know what an escort was, Zinur explained, "Yes, usually a noble's escort would be their father or a relative." Hearing Zinur's explanation, Arisha seriously stroked her chin, thinking about her escort. After careful consideration, she said, "My escort will, of course, be His Majesty the Emperor." Arisha's declaration that the Emperor would be her escort greatly surprised both Isabella and Zinur. Night fell, and the sky was filled with stars. The full moon emitted a soft light, making the starry sky incredibly beautiful. Arisha, after a tiring day, lay down on her bed with worries in her heart. "I said that, but there's no way the Emperor will accept." Arisha turned on her side, a hint of sadness on her face as she murmured, "This relationship isn't something that can be easily considered." The more Arisha thought about it, the more disappointed she felt, causing her to frown in annoyance. She felt the dance she learned was useless and lost interest, pulling the covers over herself, wanting to sleep. But she still couldn't hold back her disappointment, muttering, "Honestly, if there's no one to dance with, what's the point of learning?" She said that, but Arisha's expression couldn't hide her dejection and sense of loss, making her feel like it was truly a waste of time. As she slept, Arisha heard a voice praying, "Please give me a child. White Witch, a child who resembles him. White Witch, I truly want to meet my child." In her slumber, Arisha mumbled, "Huh? Someone else is praying to the White Witch." Again, the praying voice continued, "I hope he won't only give his love to me, but also to that child. I want to build a truly happy family. The child, him, and me too, will all be so happy. Please let that child receive love." Those sincere prayers reached the White Witch, and she responded, "I shall grant your wish, for I am the omnipotent White Witch." Early morning sunlight shone on Arisha's face. She slowly awoke, her ruby-red eyes a little hazy. Arisha sat up, rubbing her head, trying to recall last night's dream, but she couldn't remember a thing. Again? Why can't I remember anything? This has never happened before. Arisha slowly got out of bed, walking step by step toward the window. The sun's rays fell upon Arisha's small body. Looking out the window, at her reflection in the window panes, Arisha appeared deep in thought. Suddenly, she brought a hand to her face in confusion, saying, "What? It feels like I just dozed off for a moment, and my face is all puffy." Just then, the sound of a water basin crashing to the floor rang out. A slightly trembling voice called out to Arisha, catching her attention, "Your Highness." Looking at the person who had arrived, Arisha spoke, "Isabella." Nanny Isabella stood outside the door with a worried expression. A basin of water overturned and spilled across the floor. To Arisha's surprised and confused look, Isabella quickly ran to hug her tightly, her voice filled with joy. "Your Highness." Isabella held Arisha tightly, unable to stop the tears that streamed down her face as she sobbed. Seeing her nanny cry, Arisha, though unsure why, gently patted Isabella's back to comfort her and asked, "What's wrong? Did something happen while I was asleep?" Hearing Arisha's question, Isabella stood up, looking at her with concern, and replied, "Your Highness, do you know you've been fast asleep for 10 days? What?" Arisha gasped, looking at Isabella. She gripped Isabella's arm tightly, her face filled with worry and urgency, saying, 10 days? I slept that long? No, wait, what about the debutante ball? In the magnificent palace. On the table sat a bowl of light mushroom soup. Isabella's voice rang out. I thought your highness had fallen gravely ill. Orisha, after getting ready, was calmly eating the mushroom soup. Hearing Isabella say this, she just chuckled softly and said, well, at least it happened before the debutante ball. Knowing she hadn't missed the debutante ball, Orisha felt relieved. But Nanny Isabella didn't share the sentiment, saying, how can the debutante ball be more important than the princess's health? Worry was evident in Isabella's eyes. She anxiously asked, are you truly all right? Knowing her nanny was worried about her, Orisha smiled and breathed a sigh of relief. Then, Orisha smiled brightly, full of energy, proving her health as she replied to Isabella, of course. That's why I can eat normally now. While they were talking, a voice called out from afar, Your Highness! Your Highness! Looking down, they saw Debian, the magic instructor, carrying a bag and running quickly towards the castle. Seeing Debian running excitedly, Orisha asked, Debian, why are you running like that? A moment later, at a table laden with colorful and delicious-looking pastries and sweets, Orisha and Debian sat facing each other. Orisha took a sip of tea and spoke first. What is it? Why aren't you saying anything? Debian then pretended to be sad, wiping away non-existent tears, and said, Your Highness, how could I talk to you when you suddenly fainted and were unconscious for so long? Watching Debian's unconvincing performance, Orisha felt speechless. Honestly, she put down her teacup and asked, So you came here just to see if I had woken up? Hearing this, Debian quickly replied, Not exactly. Having said that, he seemed a loss for words, looking a bit embarrassed. After a moment of thought, he said, Your Highness. Orisha didn't reply, only humming in response. Debian gave a slightly awkward smile and continued, Don't you want to visit the Magic Tower? At the mention of the Magic Tower, the air around Orisha seemed to freeze. Without hesitation, she coldly refused. No, I don't. Her blunt refusal startled Debian, who exclaimed, Wow, such a quick answer. Seeing Debian's wide-eyed, open-mouthed expression, Orisha closed her eyes and turned her head away that you're definitely going to bother me, asking me to dismantle a magic circle or something, aren't you? I don't want to. Seeing her misunderstanding, Debian adjusted his glasses and said mysteriously, Your Highness, aren't you curious? Orisha looked at him without speaking, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. Without further ado, Debian continued, The citizens are researching magic for the Empire. The citizens, the citizens, the citizens. The repeated phrase echoed in Orisha's ears, annoying her immensely. Immediately, she said, The debutante ball is tomorrow and the day after, so I'm very busy. Anticipating this response, Debian replied, Your Highness doesn't need to prepare anything for that. You could just come and visit to change your mood. He slowly stood up. Debian walked over to Orisha, placed a hand on his chest, and bowed slightly in a respectful gesture. And if you happen to look at the magic circle, even better. Debian's persistence piqued her interest, bringing a small smile to her face. No longer refusing, Orisha extended her hand towards Debian. All right, let's go. As soon as Orisha's hand grasped Debian's, a golden light appeared, enveloping them both. Streams of magical energy transported them to the Magic Tower. Inside, within the Empire's Magic Tower, Orisha and Debian appeared at the tower staircase. As soon as she appeared, a cry rang out. A mage, with a shocked expression, pointed at her with wide eyes and an open mouth. Oh my goodness. Another mage hurriedly climbed down the stairs, looked towards Orisha, and exclaimed in surprise, See, could it be? Is that Her Highness the Princess? Seeing Orisha, the mages in the tower immediately surrounded her, chattering excitedly, Your Highness, what an honor. You came all the way here. Did you just use teleportation magic? Orisha glanced at Debian and saw that he, too, was being greeted by other mages. Sir Debian, you managed to drag the princess here? You're amazing. Praised. Debian responded cheerfully, Drag. Her Highness simply came here for a stroll today. Debian and two other mages then shared a laugh. Orisha watched the three of them laughing and simply stood there with her arms crossed, not saying a word. One mage, looking at Debian with sparkling, excited eyes, asked, Today will the princess? Another mage eagerly finished the sentence, dispel the magic array, looking at the two, expectantly gazing at him. Debian said with a touch of exasperation, I told you no already, you guys. Debian quickly waved goodbye to the two disappointed mages and led the princess away. I'll guide you now. Your Highness. As they walked, Debian explained, "Please forgive them, Your Highness. They bury themselves in their research every day and aren't always quite all there." Arisha walked past Debian, teasingly saying, "They're just like you." Hearing the princess compare him to the other two, Debian protested, "How can you say that?" Arisha smiled and continued walking ahead without answering, leaving Debian to sigh to himself. "If you go up there, you'll see the most impressive sight in the magic tower." Debian continued his guiding duties. Open sesame. Arisha and Debian stepped inside. Looking at everything within, her curiosity piqued. She exclaimed, "What is all this?" Seeing her interest, he replied, "Right? All of these are teleportation scrolls used to travel to other places." As he spoke, Debian proudly gestured to the scrolls covered in magic circles plastered all over the walls. Looking at each teleportation magic circle, Arisha stepped forward, thinking teleportation is a very difficult type of magic to use. So the entire magic circle needs to be transferred onto a scroll for preservation. This requires a very high level of technical skill. It's quite impressive that there are so many teleportation scrolls. Debian looked smug. After observing for a while, Arisha pointed to a teleportation scroll with 3 pulsating red rings emitting a strange aura she had never seen before. "But what is this? It looks suspicious." Looking at the magic scroll Arisha pointed at, Debian replied, "This is the scroll connected to the dragon's lair. Its power range is very wide, so they need to store it like this to prevent any incidents." Hearing this, Arisha asked, "Have you ever used it?" Debian shook his head with a hint of regret. "I've heard that those who set foot in the dragon's lair never return alive, so I wouldn't dare venture in." Arisha stared intently at the scroll, deep in thought. "But isn't it already in a deep slumber and petrified?" "Yes." Arisha pointed at the scroll and turned to Debian with a smile. "Then isn't it completely useless? Why bother preserving it so carefully?" "Well, because you made it." Debian was interrupted mid-sentence by a sudden voice. "It can be used." Raven, having just finished his research, walked over yawning wearily. Debian introduced him to Arisha. "Raven, this is him, the one who created this scroll." Raven, a mage from the magic tower. Seeing Raven confirm the teleportation scroll was usable, Arisha curiously asked, "What can it be used for?" Raven, still sleepy, yawned as he walked past them, saying, "I'll use it for the research I'm currently conducting." Just as Raven passed by, Debian noticed strange black stains on the hem of his robe. Without thinking, he immediately asked, "What happened to your robe? What's that on it?" Looking at the stains on his robe, Raven thought for a moment and replied, "I must have fallen and gotten it on something. It's no big deal, just some fruit juice." Hearing it was fruit juice, Debian exclaimed, "Wait a minute." Debian's face paled as he tried to stop him. "Isn't that stuff really sticky?" Unfortunately, he spoke too late. Looking at the scroll stuck fast to his sleeve, Raven cried out in exasperation, "It's stuck!" Then Raven tried his best to pull the scroll off. Debian, watching from the side, clutched his head in panic and yelled, "You idiot! Who told you to hold it like that?" Suddenly, a tickle in his nose came. Unable to hold back, Raven sneezed forcefully, tearing the scroll in his hand in half. Under the resonance of magic power, the teleportation scroll began to glow and suddenly activated. Arisha and Debian stared wide-eyed at the activated scroll, unable to react. A blinding crimson light flashed, pulling everyone in the magic tower along with it. In a desolate, ruined place, a mage, unable to hide his fear, yelled, "This is the dragon's lair." The mage, his heart turning to ashes, clutched his head and wailed, "Mother, help me." Another mage, his face also pale, spoke up, "I'm seeing my life flash before my eyes." All the mages who were pulled along were incredibly distraught. Without needing to speak, they knew who the culprit was and yelled for Raven, who used the teleportation scroll. "It must be Raven again, right? Where's that brat?" While the others panicked and cried, Arisha stood calmly, observing everything. Then she closed her eyes and sighed. Arisha turned and walked forward. Seeing her leave, the mages, who were drowning in despair, stopped and stared at Arisha in bewilderment, calling out, "Your Highness, where are you going?" Arisha turned back, a calm expression on her face, and with a confident smile, ordered everyone to follow her. "We have to go back. Follow me. I will help you all survive and leave this place." Arisha's gentle words carried the characteristic tone of a child. Yet, they made Debian, who had just been so angry he wanted to knock Raven out, immediately break into a bright smile, as if he firmly believed that as long as Arisha spoke the words, she would definitely make it happen. However, it wasn't just Debian who had this blind faith. The other two mages also looked at her with fervent eyes. One of them, with tears in his eyes, cheered, "Your Highness." And the other, not to be outdone, also cheered along, "Your Highness will bring us back." A moment later, within an ancient tower covered in green moss, Arisha led the way, the others following a short distance behind her. In the quiet space, the sound of her footsteps echoed clearly. The small girl walked step by step on the stairs, looking both serious and strangely adorable. Suddenly, Arisha sighed, seemingly about to say something. Sure enough, in the next second, she turned around and announced to all the mages, "There are many traps here, so follow my every step." Hearing this, one of the mages cheerfully replied, "Yes, Your Highness." After reminding everyone, Arisha sank back in her thoughts. She thought, before being reborn, "I came here several times. To leave this place, one must overcome the trials set by the dragon. If I'm still alive, I also want to try negotiating." As she was lost in thought, Debian's excited voice suddenly rang out beside her. "Your Highness, I'm fast, aren't I?" The aloof Princess Arisha said with slight surprise. "Oh, you're faster than I thought." It seemed her gentleness emboldened Debian, as he immediately voiced the guess in his heart. "But is it my mistake, or are you already very familiar with this place?" This seemingly audacious act didn't anger her. Arisha only lowered her eyes and said, "Let me see." Seeing this, Debian, as if released from a seal, burst into a torrent of words. "You're not panicking at all, as if you've been here before." Arisha immediately heard an unusual sound. However, this strange noise didn't attract anyone's attention but hers. Debian, walking beside her, kept talking nonstop. "Ah, I knew nothing could faze Your Highness." Suddenly, a sharp glint flashed across Arisha's cold, indifferent eyes. Without hesitation, she grabbed Debian by the collar, causing him to freeze, his chatter abruptly ceasing. The moment Arisha pulled his collar forward, an object whizzed past where he had just been standing with extreme speed. Debian, completely unaware, cried out, "Oh my God," as he was suddenly thrown forward by the princess. After his narrow escape from death, he immediately turned his head to look back at the strange object, yelling unconsciously, "What was that just now?" It turned out that what had attacked Debian was an arrow, now deeply embedded in the thick wall. For Arisha, saving Debian wasn't a big deal. She immediately continued forward, leaving the lucky Debian yelling behind her, "Your Highness, if you knew, you should have told me." Arisha heard his complaint and replied matter-of-factly, "Even if I had told you, your reaction would have been too slow." After a while, under Arisha's guidance, the group reached the top of the tower, looking at the meticulously carved dragon statue in front of them. Arisha couldn't help but sigh softly. This is the final trial of the dragon's lair. Someone exclaimed in astonishment, "What is that? It looks terrifying." Arisha looked at the vast space in front of her for a moment and said, "Everyone, come here." She thought to herself, still the same as before, huh? The inscription on the dragon statue's chest, despite the passage of time, could still be easily read. "Conquer your fear of dragons." As soon as those words were uttered, the entire dragon tower shook violently as if it had heard some kind of summons. This scene startled Debian, and he asked in confusion, "Is this place collapsing?" Unlike everyone else's panic, Arisha thought to herself, "This place isn't collapsing. This is the sound of the statue. It's about to unleash the dragon's breath." Thinking this, Arisha stared intently at the energy sphere forming in the dragon statue's mouth, preparing herself for battle. She thought, "We had to take this head on and endure it if we want to go back." Behind her, Debian stood frozen, along with a mage who was tearing his hair out, muttering, "What do we do now?" Elsewhere, Javen yawned loudly, and the sound of other mages sobbing could be heard. Looking at their hopeless expressions, Arisha thought, as expected, only I can withstand the dragon's breath. On the highest floor of the dragon's lair, Arisha's small figure stood protectively in front of everyone, her eyes fixed on the dragon statue. And then, just as the dragon's breath was about to strike her, Debian suddenly snapped out of his daze and rushed forward, embracing her without hesitation. Surprise flickered across Arisha's beautiful face as she realized she had been pulled out of the dragon's breath's path. In that short moment, the dragon's breath, having lost its target, dissipated into the air. With the danger past, Debian immediately questioned her with a slightly reproachful tone. "What were you doing, Your Highness? What were you doing? Why were you so foolish?" Arisha unconsciously echoed, "What?" seemingly still processing Debian's reckless act. Seeing her bewildered expression, Debian's anger flared. He even unconsciously yelled at Arisha, "Even if you were a princess, how could you withstand the dragon's breath?" But his anger was fleeting, replaced by a worry not unlike an old father seeing his child after a foolish escapade. Debian looked her over, anxiously asking, "Are you all right? Are you hurt anywhere?" After checking the headstrong princess, he breathed a sigh of relief when he saw she was unharmed, then grumbled, "Why would you do that? I was so worried. My heart nearly leaped out of my chest, you know. Don't be so reckless again. I won't survive worrying about Your Highness so much. You have to take care of yourself." Despite Debian's nagging, Arisha was lost in her own thoughts. "But we have to take that hit if we want to go back." Her small hand clenched the ash-covered hem of her dress as she thought, "Why are you so angry?" Putting aside these complicated feelings, Arisha's group returned to the princess's palace. Arisha remained silent for a long while before finally speaking. "Debian," with a hint of embarrassment, the princess continued, "Could you put me down? I'm really all right." Debian, who was carrying her, asked in confusion, "Put you down?" Just then, Isabella walked by and, seeing the two covered in dirt, exclaimed in surprise, "Your Highness, where have you been?" She asked Arisha, her eyes welling up, "Are you hurt somewhere?" Arisha immediately clarified, "No, nothing happened. Debian's just overreacting." "Right, Debian?" she said, giving him a bright smile. Sensing a subtle threat, Debian quickly responded, "Yes, that's right. Your Highness is fine. It was just me being overly protective." Seeing Debian's mouth run a bit too much, Arisha promptly kicked him in the side to shut him up. Not only that, but she also whispered a warning in his ear, "Don't mention the L word in front of the dragon." The president of the Cowards Association, Debian, immediately backtracked. His quick-witted mind shifted gears instantly. He said, "So, I carried Your Highness from the magic tower, all the way here." Hearing this, Isabella breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Oh my, let me get you a towel." As she hurried off to fetch one, Isabella's mind wandered. Behind her, Debian set Arisha down on the ground as requested. Once Arisha was steady on her feet, Debian still hadn't risen. Instead, he turned to brush the dust off the ground beneath where she had been standing. Arisha watched him intently, as if deep in thought, and then she suddenly called out to him, "Debian." Reacting reflexively, Debian immediately answered his master's call. "Yes, Your Highness?" Arisha looked down at the mage and seriously asked, "Would you like to attend my debutante ball with me?" This invitation surprised Debian so much that he was momentarily stunned. Then, a smile suddenly bloomed on his face. Still half kneeling, Debian extended a hand, his voice brimming with J-O-Y.IT would be my honor, Your Highness. Would you care for a dance? Debian's actions made Arisha so happy she covered her mouth, giggling. A slight blush colored her mud-streaked face. But after that impulsive moment, Debian's reason returned. He hesitantly withdrew his hand and cautiously asked her, "But Your Highness, is that all right?" His question puzzled Arisha. "What?" she asked. Hearing the implied permission in her question, Debian confessed his worries. "After all, this is your first debutante ball. Attending with me might be a bit." Although Debian didn't finish his sentence, the underlying meaning was clear to everyone. Arisha, always straightforward, immediately asked him directly, "So, do you think that if you become my companion, the Emperor will disapprove?" But it seemed what she was thinking about and what Debian was thinking about weren't on the same page. Debian's face crumpled as he said, "That's not it at all, Your Highness. I was simply wondering if it would be appropriate for me to attend your first debutante ball with you." He continued, "Perhaps Your Highness doesn't know, but all mages at the Magic Tower are treated like eccentrics. No matter how high their status or how renowned their reputation, they'll praise them to their faces, but behind their backs, they'll call them crazy. So I'm worried." The more he spoke, the more Debian's mood plummeted, until by the time he finished, the light in his eyes had almost vanished. It was evident how helpless he had once felt. He said, "I'm worried that my presence might lower Your Highness's standing." Arisha looked at Debian, submerged in his negative emotions, and thought, "This kind of worry is so unfamiliar. I've never even received it from the man I call father." Arisha extended her small hand and took Debian's finger. Her usually childish voice now carried a touch of nonchalant indifference. Debian, my title is the Exiled Princess, so don't mind what other people say. You're the one I choose. Debian looked up at her in surprise and then laughed. All of Debian's self-doubt and inferiority withered and vanished because of this smile. Debian scratched his head sheepishly that I'm not very good at dancing. Is that all right? She comforted him, saying, it'll probably be fine. You just need to accompany me to the party. After this, although on the surface everything seemed to be going on as usual, only Origin knew that he was the second person to step in her world. Time flew by, and the day everyone was looking forward to finally arrived. On the day of the debutante ball, from early morning, the maids in the palace were busy dressing Orija from head to toe, practically without rest. And the result did not disappoint them. After Orija was ready, exclamations rang out continuously. Goodness, Your Highness! Oh my, you look absolutely stunning today. Orija said excitedly. Really? That's great. The maid still hadn't recovered from her deadly cuteness. Yes, just like a doll. At the palace gate, Debian was already prepared and waiting for her, having been there for who knows how long. Beside him was Isabella, checking the carriage one last time before departure. Isabella was always observant of her surroundings, so she almost immediately noticed someone approaching. When she saw clearly who it was, her eyes lit up, and she even covered her mouth in surprise and astonishment. Your Highness, Isabella greeted. It turned out that the person walking towards them was the star of the day, Princess Orija. Isabella showered her with compliments. You look absolutely gorgeous. Not only Isabella, but Debian also smiled and praised her. Your Highness, you look wonderful. Having just escaped the palace maids, she now received another wave of compliments from these two. It made even a usually aloof princess blush slightly. To avoid losing her composure, Orija immediately steered the conversation to another topic. But where did you get the royal carriage? I don't think father would allow it. Isabella winked at her with a bright smile, even confidently flexing her non-existent biceps. I went through a lot of trouble for this, Your Highness. Teleportation is convenient, but I hoped you would meet more people. Not wanting to delay any longer, Debian extended his hand to Orija. Shall we go, Your Highness? Her small hand rested on Debian's slender one. Orija lifted her skirt and stepped into the royal carriage. Before leaving, Orija didn't forget to turn and bid farewell to her thoughtful maid. Thank you, Isabella. I'll be going now. A moment later, the royal carriage brought the two of them to the royal palace. After getting out of the carriage, Orija took Debian's arm and leisurely walked inside. A servant standing guard at the main gate of the palace placed a hand over their chest and bowed respectfully to her. It is an honor to meet you, Princess. Please proceed to the second floor. Watching her petite figure, the invited nobles immediately found a new topic of conversation. I heard she's been confined to the princess's palace for 9 years, haven't you? A noblewoman, fanning herself, remarked, she's the emperor's only child, you know. Another noble beside her added, but I doubt his majesty has forgotten Empress Cecilia's death. After all, their hushed whispers faded into the background as Orija, having just reached the second floor, spotted someone she hadn't expected to see. Despite her surprise, Orija politely curtsied to the man she called father. Greetings, Your Majesty. The emperor's brows furrowed the moment he saw the daughter he'd neglected for 9 years. In her beautiful, yet still youthful face, he saw the ghost of the woman he had once loved so dearly. Her gentle smile, perhaps the most bittersweet memory of his life. But Orija's next words pulled him back to the present. I assumed you wouldn't attend the debutante ball. Standing beside her nominal father, her tone equally indifferent, she continued, you didn't inform me beforehand. Just as she finished speaking, the doors before them opened. Orija and Emperor Robertus stepped forward as the attendant announced. The son of the Empire, Emperor Robertus Zalopesia, and Princess Orija, entering. Looking down at the bowing nobles, Orija finished her sentence with an icy tone. It seems the Empire's only princess, almost became a laughingstock for attending my debutante ball without an escort. Her gaze flicked towards Debian, standing behind her. Fortunately, this scholar agreed to be my escort. Isn't that right? Though every word to Robertus seemed barbed, deep down, Orija still yearned for a sliver of her father's attention. Yet, all she received was his coldly retreating back. Orija stood rooted to the spot, silent. Debian, noticing her emotions, couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for the princess who wasn't even 10 years old. He walked to her side and said, "I didn't expect to run into His Majesty so soon. It gave me quite a fright." Debian smiled and extended his hand. "Would Your Highness care for a dance?" At Debian's invitation, a smile touched Arisha's lips. "All right, let's go." With that, they descended to the first floor hand in hand. Arisha looked at Debian with playful curiosity. "Can you dance as well as you did during practice?" Debian, aware of his weakness in this area, despite his nervousness, tried to maintain his composure. "Yes, Your Highness, I can." As he finished speaking, Arisha's small hand rested on his. They began the dance they had practiced so long ago. However, the festivities hadn't lasted long when the chandelier hanging from the ceiling suddenly plummeted. The unexpected event caused widespread panic, everyone screaming and scrambling to escape. The debutante ball had descended into chaos. Arisha, always more perceptive than most, couldn't help but notice the sound. She furrowed her brow, thinking, what was that? Just then, Subin burst through the door with his guards, shouting a warning, "Intruders! Evacuate!" As soon as he finished speaking, a wave of attackers crashed through the windows. Each one was masked, revealing only their eyes. Faced with this sudden assault, the noble ladies and gentlemen present screamed and fled in terror. Arisha, as one of the central figures of the party, felt a sense of responsibility. "Debian, get everyone out." Debian immediately replied, "Yes, Your Highness. Please be careful." After receiving his orders, Debian began guiding the guests towards the exits. Meanwhile, Arisha, covering her nose and mouth against the dust and smoke, looked around to see if anyone had been left behind. She spotted a young noblewoman hiding in a corner of the palace. Reaching the woman, Arisha extended her hand. "What are you doing here, miss? Get up." The woman seemed startled by her presence, stammering, "Your Highness," as she allowed Arisha to pull her to her feet. Time was of the essence, so Arisha resorted to more forceful methods. She scolded the woman without hesitation. "Calm down, if you don't want to die here." The sharp words seemed to snap the woman back to reality. She stammered, "Yes, Your Highness." Seeing that she had regained her composure, Arisha led her towards the exit. But as they ran, she suddenly sensed someone approaching. Over there. With that thought, Arisha turned her head towards a corner of the palace. Almost without hesitation, Arisha extended her hand, gathering magic, prepared to dispatch the assassin. But this time her magic failed. The malfunction caused Arisha to quickly withdraw her hand. She looked down at it in disbelief, even uttering unconsciously, What's going on?" Debian, near the exit, noticed her stunned expression, but the distance was too great for him to intervene. Seeing the attacker closing in on Arisha, Debian could only shout in desperation, "Your Highness!" Rewinding a few minutes, Subin Isaac, a knight of the royal palace responsible for protecting the emperor and princess, stared in disbelief at the chaotic scene before him. A bead of cold sweat rolled down his cheek. Where are His Majesty and the princess? As Subin ran into the palace, he finally located one of them. However, what he saw was an enemy's blade about to strike Princess Arisha's small frame, accompanied by Debian's frantic cry, "Your Highness!" Almost instantly, Subin lunged towards the attacker. While Arisha was still staring at her hand in a daze, Subin swiftly dispatched the assassin, the attacker's crimson blood splattering across his cold, impassive face. After dealing with the enemy, Subin anxiously asked her, "Princess, are you all right?" However, the moment he finished his sentence, the sight before his eyes left him speechless. Looking at the girl who was emotionlessly observing her surroundings, a complex feeling welled up inside him. Even with death and blood splattering before her, she remained unfazed, not at all like a 9-year-old child. Arisha didn't have time to care about what others thought of her at this moment. Her eyes darted in a certain direction as if confirming her suspicions. Just as she suspected, there was one person behind the pillar and another on the other side. Why couldn't she use her powers earlier? If that's the case, then if one strategy fails, try another. Arisha immediately called out, "Sir Isaac." Subin flinched at her voice, but politely replied, "Yes, Your Highness." "Give me your sword." Arisha immediately stated her request, but this request left him slightly bewildered. "Yes, my sword, Your Highness." However, Before he could react, she had already snatched his sword and left. With each step she took, the tip of the sword dragged across the carpet, creating a long tear. Yet she paid no attention to this, only thinking, my magic is unstable. How frustrating. It wasn't like this in my past life. If I can't use magic this time. Taking a deep breath, Arisia pointed the sword straight at the ground, as if preparing for something very important. As she slowly raised her arm, she reassured herself, don't doubt, it will be all right. Trust yourself. The moment she finished her sentence, she immediately put all her strength into her arm and plunged the sword into the ground. An enormous magic circle appeared around Arisia, surrounding the assassins who were trying to approach her. Ice magic began to slow their movements, even to the point where they couldn't move. Subin was astonished by the power of the magic. Before his eyes, she sighed, thinking no problem, right? She slowly pulled the sword from the ground and then swung it, defeating the assassins. A moment later, after tying them to a nearby pillar, Arisia gently brushed the dust off her dress. She calmly wiped the blood from her face, thinking to herself, now Debian. Seeing Debian's unconscious form nearby, she was shocked and immediately shouted his name. Debian. In a room somewhere in the palace, Arisia stood looking at Debian. She frowned in annoyance, silently reproaching. Even the Emperor has disappeared, yet you're still here saving people. Debian's condition worsened. Arisia used her magic on him, a golden light enveloping him. Debian's complexion eased, and she sighed wearily. Arisia sat down in a nearby chair, dejected. The palace was in an uproar, so what was the Emperor doing? Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, and she immediately said, Come in. Sidelt rushed in, his face pale, panting, Your Highness, His Majesty. Hearing him say this, she was immediately puzzled. Scene change. In the Emperor's bedroom, Arisia and Sidelt stood assessing the situation, Robertus lying still on the bed. She thought to herself, I sense dark magic. Was he hit? She stared at him, then pondered. In the final battle, he was hit with dark magic and survived. But it seems his health has completely deteriorated. He looks so frail. Arisia asked the royal physician beside her, When will he wake up? He stammered, Teach it. We'll have to monitor him further, Your Highness. Noticing her murderous glare, the physician panicked and fearfully explained, Anyway, His Majesty's body is exhausted from the prolonged war. Arisia's face darkened. You mean you don't know exactly when he'll wake up? The royal physician immediately knelt, stammering, I will do my best, Your Highness. Sidelt anxiously approached, whispering to her, Your Highness. Lady Kira has escaped from prison. She was stunned by his announcement. What? He continued. It seems she escaped during the chaos caused by the intruders. Sidelt stepped back, bowing hesitantly that I know this isn't the right time to discuss this. But if His Majesty remains absent for a while, Your Highness will have to handle urgent matters. Arisia replied, I don't like that. Makes you itch, doesn't it? Yes, Your Highness. She chuckled dryly. What if, after Father wakes up, he gets angry thinking I covet his position? I am scared. She noticed his discomfort. His current appearance included dark circles under his eyes. For 3 years, while the Emperor was at war, you handled all the work. She sighed. Have you found the starting point of the explosion? Sidelt was slightly surprised, then reported, Yes, Your Highness. The starting point of the explosion and the raid was the dungeon beneath the Imperial Palace. She asked, So those strangers are also related to Lady Kira? He replied, I think so, Your Highness, and I'm investigating further. Arisia pondered, breaching the Imperial Palace's protective barrier and infiltrating the banquet without making any noise. She smiled smugly. It seems there's a little mouse in the Imperial Palace. She ordered, find all the missing prisoners and Lady Kira. A moment later, Arisia stared intently at the map, thinking to herself, I plan to look for traces of Kira around the casino. But she's too cunning. She's scattered traces everywhere, making it impossible for me to distinguish what's real. She analyzed the map in her hand. She frowned, tiredly tossing the paper aside. This is exhausting. Arisia pondered, I don't know what kind of person Lady Kira is. Clearly, this wasn't just 1 or 2 people acting. Do I have to look into this too? It'll be quite troublesome if the Emperor wakes up with nothing to do. She mused, then sat up. She continued to ponder, but the problem isn't that. It's my mana. Arisia stared intently at her own power. I have to check what the reason is. She immediately went to the Emperor's room. The door to the room opened, and 2 maids were surprised by her appearance. Oh my, one of them exclaimed, Princess. Arisia, startled, signaled for silence. She gently approached Robertus. She tried to use her magic, but the golden light gradually faded. She thought to herself, near the Emperor, I can't control my mana. I can't even use magic. Magic. Orisha then tried to touch him, and from afar, a moved maid said, Your Highness is amazing. You mean you hope His Majesty wakes up soon, right? Another maid smiled and said, Even though he's confined in the palace by his father, he's still his father. After a while, Orisha worried. As expected, finding the Emperor's weakness is very difficult. What is the connection between my mana and the Emperor's? Robertus lay still on the bed, and suddenly, his face twitched slightly, startling her. Orisha turned and quickly left. As the other maid asked in confusion, Oh, are you leaving already? She tried to call her back. Princess! The noise woke Robertus. He glanced towards the door, only to see it wide, open, and empty. Sedelt stood to the side and said to Robertus, who was still sitting on the bed, I will report. Regarding the explosion at the debutante ball, his gaze immediately focused on Sedelt's report. Sedelt looked intently at the papers. The princess requested I investigate further. The escaped prisoners have been recaptured and imprisoned, but the whereabouts of Lady Kira, the center of the incident, still require further investigation. Robertus spoke. There's a little mouse hiding in the imperial palace, isn't there? This surprised Sedelt, who saw the emperor's serious expression. Sedelt bowed. I have reported everything, Your Majesty. He thought to himself, like father, like daughter. He recalled Orisha's words. It seems there's a little mouse in the imperial palace. The emperor ordered, continue the investigation as the princess commanded. Sedelt immediately obeyed. Scene change. In a secret cellar, mysterious figures were engaged in a lively discussion. They noticed the silhouette of someone approaching. Kira strode in triumphantly, and everyone around her began to laugh. She immediately declared, The takeover of the empire is not far off now. At the imperial palace, Orisha stared intently at the letter in her hand. It read, The princess is invited to a tea party. If it's convenient, would you consider joining me for tea? I await your reply. Elizabeth Herdep. Isabella smiled as she approached Orisha. A tea party sounds lovely, Your Highness. Orisha looked puzzled. Elizabeth Herdep? Isabella reminded her. I believe I've heard that the Duke of Herdep's daughter is the same age as Your Highness. Orisha continued to ponder. Isabella, enthusiastic, continued, Since you've already made your debut into high society, building connections would be beneficial. Her eyes shone brightly as she looked at Orisha. Orisha responded resignedly, Is that so? Orisha relented. Tell them I accept the invitation to the tea party. Isabella replied excitedly, Yes, Your Highness. Orisha looked at her and said, And Isabella? Isabella, confused, asked and Orisha smiled. Let's take a stroll in the rose garden. Isabella smiled back. Yes, Your Highness. In the rose garden, Isabella looked around. The weather is lovely today. Orisha smiled as she walked ahead. Indeed, it's not for nothing that the rose garden is the pride of the imperial palace. Isabella took her hand. But, Your Highness, what if we happen to run into His Majesty? Orisha asked suspiciously, Is Isabella afraid of His Majesty? Isabella worried. How can I not be afraid? Your Highness. She smiled, thinking to herself, At worst, he's just like a grumpy cat. She reassured Isabella, It's all right. If we happen to see Father, we'll just greet him and continue on our way. Orisha turned to ask Isabella, Let me tell you something interesting. Isabella, curious, replied, Something interesting, Your Highness? Orisha continued walking. Do you know there's a teleportation magic circle here? Isabella worried. No, Your Highness, I've never heard of such a thing. Orisha smiled smugly. I think Father might be the one who created it. Orisha offered so. Do you want to go? Isabella immediately became flustered. What? What do you mean, Your Highness? If His Majesty created it, how could I possibly? It's not allowed. Orisha released Isabella's hand. Well then, Isabella, why don't you take a stroll and head back first? Isabella hesitated, unable to speak. Oh. Orisha smiled and turned away. I'll go take a look. Isabella said fearfully, Yes, Your Highness. Isabella called after her, Your Highness, please be careful. Your Highness. Orisha waved to Isabella behind her. Lost in thought, she mused, Let me see who created it. She analyzed, arranged sequentially. Her eyes landed on something. She noticed a nearby building. Orisha wondered, over there. She accidentally stepped into the magic circle. She smiled as if she had found something amusing. Immediately, Orisha was transported to an unfamiliar place. Orisha smiled in surprise. She saw Robertus sleeping at the base of a tree. She pondered, why choose a place like this too? Dekonop. Arisha approached him. She thoughtfully assessed. Even if this place is surrounded by magic, it's strange for the emperor of an empire to sleep here without any fear. Wasn't he unwell? She stared at him. A flower petal fell onto his face. Arisha marveled. Seeing him like this, his face doesn't look so cruel. She sat down next to Robertus. She removed the petal from his face, causing him to wake up. Arisha smiled at him somewhat sheepishly. What a wonderful day, father. Robertus frowned. How did you get in here? She replied, it wasn't that difficult for me. He stood up and asked, what are you? Arisha looked confused. I don't understand what you're saying. He snapped, don't pretend you don't know. I won't let you leave until I get an answer. The wind gently brushed through her hair. She asked, and what about your majesty? Robertus looked at her. What? Arisha said, her expression turning serious, am asking what your majesty is? Robertus angrily retorted, I'm not joking with you now. I'm asking if you truly carry the blood of the royal family, or just an outer shell. She replied, if I only carried the outer shell of royalty, what would you have done when the imperial palace fell into chaos after being attacked? Arisha reproached, the one who protected the citizens of the empire wasn't your majesty, but me. What did your majesty do during that time? Her gaze turned cold. I just want to ask, is an emperor who can't protect his own people even worthy of being called an emperor? Instead of a father who couldn't even take care of himself, I resolved everything that day, and now I'm being treated like this? If you feel wronged, then explain why you fainted. The emperor frowned silently, offering no response. She also silently looked up at him. Then, Arisha bowed slightly and asked for permission to leave. It seems you aren't inclined to speak, so I'll take my leave. She immediately used magic to teleport. In a moment, only the emperor was left standing there. Lost in thought, his eyes drifted downwards. His memory replayed the moment someone tried to assassinate. Arisha, a figure, cloaked in black from head to toe, was slowly approaching her. Seeing this, the emperor frowned slightly, hurriedly descending the stairs, one hand discreetly reaching for his sword. Suddenly, a surge of dark magic rushed towards him. He seemed to sense it and couldn't help but shudder. Then, the emperor coughed up a mouthful of blood. He collapsed, leaning on his sword, his hand covering and wiping the blood as he muttered, a dark magic barrier. The emperor's face paled, and he cursed in frustration. Then, his vision slowly darkened. He returned to reality with that memory and a vacant expression. He closed his eyes as if to reassure himself. The carriage arrived at the villa. Arisha slowly stepped down. Someone approached and said, it's an honor to meet the princess. Elizabeth appeared, gently bowing to her. I sincerely thank you for coming. Arisha looked at the girl in surprise. Miss, she remembered and asked, you were at the debutante ball at the Imperial Palace, weren't you? Elizabeth took her hand and replied, yes, Your Highness. The girl, overflowing with joy, said, I want to thank Your Highness for saving me at the debutante ball. Elizabeth recalled Arisha's actions. Actually, it was a bit scary seeing Your Highness fight those people, but Your Highness bravely stood up for the people. Arisha felt a sense of doubt upon hearing this. Elizabeth, now brimming with happiness, continued, you must have been scared too, Your Highness. She replied awkwardly, yes. Unable to contain her excitement, the girl asked, how did Your Highness learn magic? Arisha replied, I wasn't taught separately. This answer confused Elizabeth. Yes, Your Highness. Then how? Arisha improvised again, I suppose, by feeling and experience. Elizabeth exclaimed, is that even possible? Her eyes sparkling. She continued, so how proficient is Your Highness with magic? Arisha smiled to herself. Then she said, it seems you're very curious. Let me show you. Arisha snapped her fingers and their surroundings brightened. Intensely, Elizabeth was incredibly excited. The blue sea rippled, the sky was clear, and seagulls soared through the air. All of this made Elizabeth incredibly eager. Am I dreaming? Arisha extended her hand and said, come on, since we're here, we have to enjoy ourselves. The girl's eyes sparkled. Yes, Your Highness. Arisha then said, you can call me Miss here, don't call me Your Highness. The girl replied, yes, Your High. I mean Mississippi. Next, they arrived at a bustling town. Passing by all sorts of stalls, everything amazed Elizabeth. The girl said cheerfully, let's go over there. Arisha led her to a souvenir stall. The girl exclaimed, it's so beautiful. She asked, are these handicrafts symbolic of the White Witch? The vendor cheerfully replied, you have a keen eye. I was inspired by the moon and made these handicrafts to honor the White Witch. So, if you hang this in your room and pray, your wish might come true. Arisha listened thoughtfully as she looked around. Her gaze landed on the stall displaying wind chimes, White Witch souvenirs. How strange. The vendor cheerfully continued, "You seem quite interested, Mississippi. Do you like the legend of the White Witch?" Arisha hesitated for a moment, saying, "Well, let's see." Elizabeth, however, was brimming with enthusiasm. "I love it. I've been praying lately." She quickly chose an item. "I'll take that one, please." The vendor thanked her warmly. Elizabeth excitedly showed her purchase to Arisha. "Miss, look, it's so white and sparkly." Arisha gave a shy nod. The girl beamed, "I'll put it above my bed and hope for a good night's sleep." Arisha looked at her in surprise, then chuckled. White Witch indeed. They then entered a crowded area, struggling to navigate through the throngs of people. Arisha thought, "It's so crowded right now. I have to be careful not to get pulled away. Should I teleport?" Suddenly, she realized something. She looked around, but Elizabeth was nowhere to be seen. Lost in a dark alleyway, Elizabeth hid and began to cry softly. Tears welled in her eyes as she fearfully whispered, "What should I do? If this continues, I won't be able to go home." Suddenly, a gloomy voice called out, "Little girl, over here." Elizabeth immediately responded, "Yes, ma'am. Me." From the end of the alley emerged an old woman in a black cloak. She smiled and beckoned the girl. "Yes, pretty little girl, come here." Elizabeth approached her. "What is it?" The old woman reached into her pocket, pulled out a mirror, and said, "A gift for such a pretty little girl. Doesn't this mirror suit you perfectly?" Elizabeth stared up in bewilderment. "A mirror?" A puff of purple smoke enveloped her, and her eyes changed. Elizabeth's eyes became vacant. "It does, doesn't it?" The old woman coaxed her. "Just 2 taels of silver." Suddenly, Arisha appeared and snatched the mirror. The mirror fell to the ground, and she immediately stomped on it. The old woman stared back in disbelief. What was that? Then, a flash of light streaked past, and the old woman realized with utter terror who Arisha was. Arisha looked at her with a defiant smirk. "What kind of ridiculous trick was that? Don't make me repeat myself." The old woman was speechless with fear. Later, at a tea shop, Elizabeth's sobs echoed. She buried her face in her hands. "I thought I would never see my parents again." Arisha used a fork to divide a pastry. She turned and offered a piece to Elizabeth, comforting her. "Everything turned out all right, Mississippi. Please calm down." She then fed Elizabeth the pastry. Elizabeth said shyly, "Thank you so much, Your Highness. You always help me." Arisha replied gently, "It's only natural, Mississippi." Her expression turned serious as she thought about something. She remembered the moment she crushed the mirror, her angry words. "I asked what kind of ridiculous trick that was. Don't make me repeat myself." The old woman had been left speechless and pale. Then she hurriedly ran away. "I don't know anything." Arisha thought to herself, "I'm sure that's black magic." She looked around. Were there really this many people using black magic in this empire? Arisha suddenly became gloomy. Had it suddenly increased? Suddenly, Elizabeth held the cake closer to feed her. The little girl cheerfully said, "You're high." "Aw, no, miss, please eat too. It's very delicious." Arisha took a bite and said, "Thank you." Then she enjoyed the cake. She thought to herself, "Sooner or later, I'll have to investigate this thoroughly." Dusk had fallen. Elizabeth's butler and servants hurriedly ran out to greet her. He anxiously said, "Miss, where have you been? Do you know how long we've been looking for you?" He held Elizabeth's shoulders, breathing a sigh of relief. "It's good that you're all right." She fearfully asked, "Did you tell my father?" The butler hesitated. At this moment, someone stepped out from inside. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Princess." Duke Herdet bowed slightly to her. Arisha said, "I was just taking a short walk, but I seem to have caused everyone to worry." Elizabeth excitedly said from beside her, "I went to the beach with Her Highness. It was incredibly beautiful." Duke Herdep looked bewildered. "The beach?" Arisha quickly explained, "Miss Elizabeth has never been to the beach, so I took her there. For a bit." She added emphatically, "She wasn't hurt at all, so please don't scold her too much." The Duke replied sheepishly, "Not at all, Your Highness. It was our honor." Elizabeth held her skirt and curtsied, saying, "Today was truly enjoyable, Your Highness." Arisha replied, "I hope to see you again soon." Then she turned and boarded her carriage. She looked back. The Duke and Elizabeth walked inside hand in hand, chatting and laughing, looking very happy. Arisha closed her eyes slightly, her heart feeling heavy. She consoled herself, my real family is only Isabella, so I don't need to feel this sad. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the depths of Arisha's memories. I hope you will learn to love that child, and that child will receive love from everyone. The guard beside her, seeing her dazed expression, asked, Your Highness, are you all right? She paled and fainted, saying, I'm fine. Somewhere else, Cadiol spoke. I mean the fact that the princess is likened to a monster when she uses magic. His confidant replied, yes. He smirked. The emperor neglected the princess like that for 9 years. He lightly shook the hourglass in his hand. Yes, I heard she only recently left the palace. Cadiol scoffed. Even though he held the goose that laid the golden eggs, he still abandoned the princess because of personal feelings? That emperor is too foolish. This man was Cadiol Reventris, the emperor of the Reventris Empire. He said, You've worked hard. You may leave. The attendant replied, Yes, your majesty. As the attendant opened the door and bowed respectfully, a red-haired person entered. The person called his name, and Cadiol happily stood up. The person who entered was Kira Seri, Cadiol's older sister. He said, I'm glad you're safe. They clinked their wine glasses. She said, It's thanks to you sending the knights at the right time that I was able to escape. Kira Seri sipped her wine and said, It's a shame the emperor didn't die in the war. Very good. He continued, Moreover, the emperor has become vulnerable to black magic, so we can expand our influence of black magic within the empire. She chuckled. That's good news. Cadiol gripped his glass tighter. The emperor is such a fool. He scoffed. He knows the princess is skilled in magic, yet he keeps pushing her away because of his dead wife. Kira Seri said cheerfully, Fortunately, this doesn't affect us. We just need to exploit the rift between the emperor and the princess. Cadiol added, Then, it won't be long before the empire falls at Reventris's feet. Kira Seri smiled. She said, It's been a while since something this exciting has happened. I'm looking forward to it. Cadiol agreed. Meanwhile, Arisha lay in bed, feeling utterly bored. She suggested, Isabella, let's go out. Isabella immediately asked, But, Your Highness, you just returned from the sea. She offered suggestions to Arisha. You enjoy reading, don't you? Why don't you read and rest well today? Then, Isabella brought 2 stacks of books and placed them on the table. Arisha pouted and clicked her tongue. She sighed and opened a book, then seemed to have an idea. She called Isabella over. Isabella approached. What is it, Your Highness? Arisha excitedly pointed at the book that let's go fishing. She flipped to a page showing a sea monster and continued enthusiastically. Let's go catch a kraken. Isabella quickly refused. No way. It looks terrifying just from the picture. You want to catch that? It's too dangerous. Absolutely not. Arisha froze, her expression stiff. She tried to persuade Isabella that I'll be careful. No, still no. But it's a kraken. That's why I said no. It tastes amazing, though. She looked at Arisha with sparkling eyes, but it was no use. There are plenty of dishes in the palace that are more delicious than kraken. Arisha pouted. Really? No way. Isabella reiterated yes. What if something happens? What if it eats you? Then Arisha quietly said, I understand. A light shimmered around her. Well then, Isabella suddenly realized something. Arisha used teleportation and cheerfully announced, I'll go alone, be very careful, and come right back. I'll be back in a flash. Isabella watched her disappear, unable to do anything. She cried out in a panic, Your Highness. Arisha's teleportation destination was the Kraken's lake in the Empire. As soon as she arrived, she exclaimed, Wow, it's huge. She gently landed on the ground. She used her power. The Kraken emerged from the lake. She thought, where should I start? Bubbles rose to the surface of the water. It surfaced, and Arisha stared in amazement. Countless tentacles reached above the water. She laughed joyfully. Great. It came out on its own. She used her power to fly upwards. Arisha looked down, studying it. I just need to tie its legs together. She eagerly prepared to act. Fishing is easy. She used chains to bind its tentacles. Arisha forcefully pulled it out of the water. She frowned at it. The tentacles seemed to be struggling. She looked puzzled though what's wrong with it. Its tentacles are surrounded by strands of black power. She reached out and loosened the chains binding it. Then, she boldly approached it to see what was wrong. The black magic immediately spread to her. Arisha pinched her nose in disgust. What is this? Which idiot dared to release poison into this entire lake? She then realized that someone had deliberately driven the Kraken mad. Suddenly, she heard gasping. Arisha turned to look. Under a tree sat a blue-haired boy. Seeming to sense her gaze, he looked up. He was a boy who appeared to be around her age and looked like he had just been splashed with water or had struggled to escape something. She wondered, where did that sound come from? Did he end up like this because of the Kraken? She sighed in relief. It's a good thing he didn't get poisoned. She gently landed near him. Arisha snapped her fingers, lifting the Kraken out of the water. She placed it in front of the boy. He gaped at her in astonishment. She said, "You keep it." Arisha continued, "I don't need it anymore. I can't bring a poisoned Kraken back," to Isabella. The boy pulled himself up to a sitting position. He bowed formally. "Thank you for saving me." She reminded him, "Don't come near the lake again." Then she used teleportation magic, adding, "Because I don't know how many more Kraken are lurking out there." Then she left as the boy watched her go. He watched for a moment, then replied, "All right." At the palace at this time, Isabella paced back and forth anxiously. Suddenly, a beam of light appeared on the ceiling. Arisha appeared. Isabella cried out in alarm, "Your Highness." She rushed to catch Arisha. Isabella said sternly, "Your Highness." Arisha quickly avoided her gaze and explained, "But this time I told you where I was going. And you know I'm very strong, so I wouldn't get hurt." "Oh, actually, the Kraken wasn't anything special." Isabella gently sat down and placed her down, then said, "Even if you are strong, next time you must bring me with you, wherever you go." Isabella continued sadly, "If something were to happen to your Highness and I wasn't there." Arisha comforted her. "I know. I'll bring Isabella with me wherever I go. But where should we go next time? Is there anywhere you want to go?" Suddenly, a servant spoke up about that. He continued cautiously, "Please pardon my interruption, Your Highness, but how about Lake Harina in the Reventress Empire?" She looked at him. "Who is this servant, Harina?" He tried to persuade her. "Yes, Your Highness. This lake is incredibly vast, with beautiful blue light. The water is also very clear, so many nobles often go there to fish." Arisha looked at him suspiciously. He fell silent. Then she said, "All right, let's go there." The servant breathed a sigh of relief. He smiled. They teleported to Lake Harina. The scenery was as beautiful as he had described. The servant flattered her. "Wow, this is the first time I've seen someone use teleportation magic so easily." She replied, "It's just basic." She turned to look at the lake in front of her. Arisha smiled. "Truly fascinating." Isabella, beside her, seemed to hear something and asked, "Yes, Your Highness?" She smiled brightly and replied, "It's nothing." Then she started fishing. Arisha happily fished, saying, "Fishing is so fun." Isabella cheered her on from the side. "Your Highness, you're so good." A nearby attendant flattered her. "Your Highness, you're amazing." He continued, "There are rumors that Your Highness is a genius. Nothing can trouble you, and it seems they're all true." She cheerfully replied, "Of course nothing can trouble me." The attendant continued, "It's an honor to be near such a genius as you." Arisha said, "Thank you for thinking so." The attendant continued, "So, Your Highness." He excitedly asked, "Could you walk on water?" She casually replied, "On water? That's normal, just like walking on land." Isabella gasped from behind, "Really? You can walk on water?" Arisha said, "It's not a big deal, just a light step." The attendant excitedly said, "Show me. I want to see." Isabella worriedly asked, "Is that all right?" Arisha looked at him and said, "You want to see me walk on water that badly?" The attendant eagerly replied, "Yes." Then, she lightly placed her foot on the surface of the water and casually began to walk. Arisha turned back and said, "See? Amazing, right?" Isabella excitedly replied, "Amazing, Your Highness." Suddenly, he said, "Do you know about that?" Isabella looked at him, confused. Arisha looked at both of them, puzzled. He continued, "About the entire Reventress Empire being a magic circle." Arisha smirked. "Of course I know." Arisha recalled the moment the servant had spoken. "Excuse me, Your Highness, what about Lake Harina in the Reventress Empire?" She thought, quite commendable of him to dare to sneak into the princess's palace. At that time, she began to suspect him. His voice is a little different from someone from the Eastern Empire, this guy, so she decided to play along and see what he was planning. Arisha was suddenly bound by a magical force, unable to escape. Thick smoke filled the air. She covered her face, inwardly assessing her opponent. Sleep magic and teleportation? The Emperor here isn't very bright, is he? Arisha's eyes darkened. "If I see you again, you're dead." Isabella ran towards her in a panic, but it was too late. She had fainted. "Oh dear, Isabella, this will be quite a surprise." Inside the royal palace, Robertus was working. He was listening to his aide, Sedelt, report on some documents. Suddenly, the door to the study burst open. Isabella rushed in, breathless. "Your Majesty," she stammered, her face pale. "Her Highness, the princess, is in the Reventress Empire." She swayed and then collapsed, whispering before she lost consciousness, "She's been kidnapped." Just in time, the servant caught her, preventing her from falling to the floor. Sedelt was stunned by the situation. He urgently looked at Robertus. "Your Majesty." Robertus immediately put down his pen. His expression became grave, summoned the ministers. Elsewhere, Cades laughed triumphantly. He roared with laughter after hearing the report from his subordinate. He sneered, putting on such arrogant airs, "But she's just a child. A few compliments and her nose is in the air." From the moment the princess stepped foot into the empire, Reventress, it's like a bird in a cage. He turned to ask the servant, "Have you dealt with the princess's nanny?" The servant respectfully replied, "I have sent her back to the empire to report that the princess is in the Reventress Empire, Your Highness." From afar, footsteps echoed. Kirisari entered gracefully. "Isn't it time for the princess to wake up? That's all." He immediately replied to his sister, "I was just about to go." Cade stood up and curiously asked, "But is it true that the princess really resembles the emperor?" Kirisari calmly replied, "When I saw her, she had the appearance of an adult, perhaps using magic, but that aura is exactly like the emperor's." He, intrigued, walked toward Orisha's location. "That you've made me anxious." "Well, I'll be going." She calmly replied, "All right, I'll come down after I've finished cleaning up. Enjoy yourself." In the basement, Orisha was under a magic seal, only able to sit on a chair. She opened one eye to probe her surroundings. Someone stepped inside the magic circle. She pretended to be still unconscious. "Honestly, I absolutely hate silver hair." Cades looked down with murderous intent. Orisha tried to move her hand, calculating, "This is a magic sealing spell, so I'll assess the situation first." She slowly opened her eyes. Cades pressed himself close to her. He spoke frantically. "So, are you awake, little princess?" She recoiled, disgusted by him. "Get that ugly face away from me," she snapped, irritating him slightly. She continued, "And little princess? It gives me goosebumps." He froze, watching her struggle to free herself from the handcuffs. Cade suddenly burst into laughter, then furrowed his brows, looking down on Orisha. "Quite the sharp tongue, but that won't solve anything, princess. I've used the Reventress Empire's special magic array." She retorted, not to be outdone, "You think I can't do anything because of this?" He calmly replied, "Oh, I'm so scared. If you could do something, you would have done it by now." Cade stood up, stroking his hair. "Just wait a little longer. I'll show you something very interesting." His words made her curious. "Something interesting?" He gave her a cruel smile. "That aren't you curious? I wonder if the Emperor of the Eastern Empire is so cold-hearted that he wouldn't care about his only daughter being in danger." Orisha was startled by his words. He continued, "I'm so curious." She began to clench her fists. "If I were to tell the man who calls himself your father that his little princess is imprisoned here, how would he react?" Orisha fell into deep thought. Kirisari entered, noticing her brother's expression. She smiled at Orisha, who was utterly confused. "What? Why is she here?" Kirisari handed Cades an orb. "The connection with the Emperor of the Eastern Empire has been established." Orisha was surprised that that's a communication orb. The image of Robertus and Sedelt appeared within the orb. Orisha gasped, "Oh my god." Cades brought the orb closer to his face, a challenging look in his eyes. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Emperor." He gestured towards Orisha, who was pale and stunned, restrained in the chair. "See your daughter yet?" She cursed inwardly. "This madman, is that what you mean?" Robertus, on the other side, gritted his teeth in fury. "What are you plotting, Cades Reventress?" He laughed slyly. "Still the same temper, I see." Cades circled behind Orisha. He held a knife to her throat, his voice menacing. "Today, I will kill the princess." This nonsense." She pondered for a moment, then sighed. "But if the Emperor comes all the way here to save the princess." His words fueled Robertus's rage even further. "However," he continued, "then I can postpone it for a day." Cadiol tightened his grip on the orb, challenging him. "What will you do? Can you delay your daughter's death for a day?" The communication orb gradually cracked and shattered before Orisha's astonished eyes. She thought to herself, What is this? Giving up already?" A grotesque laugh echoed throughout the room. Cadiol, with a malicious expression, taunted Orisha. "Your father doesn't love you at all, does he, princess?" His words pierced her heart like a knife. Her magic was unusable, and her father had abandoned her. What could she do? A deep, indescribable sadness welled up in Orisha's eyes. Facing his relentless provocation, she softly affirmed yes. Without a shred of hope, Orisha admitted, "I've been abandoned." Cadiol's eyes widened in surprise. Immediately afterward, a tremendous explosion erupted. In an instant, Cadiol was sent flying, crashing into the wall behind him, creating a large dent and cracks. Orisha stood before him and spoke, her voice filled with a mixture of fury and despair. "You seem to be enjoying yourself, don't you? Anyone who touched her would face dire consequences." She growled, "Do you like having fun?" Cadiol gave a helpless smile, more monstrous than the Emperor himself. Suddenly, Kirasari stepped forward from behind, interrupting the tense atmosphere. "Family," she continued, a cryptic smile playing on her lips, "is something that seems closest at times, but in reality doesn't always go your way." Orisha, unhesitating, asked directly, "What do you mean?" Kirasari calmly replied, "Do you truly believe the Emperor considers you family? Even if you share the same blood, you rarely see each other." As she finished speaking, Orisha lowered her head. Tears welled up in her crimson eyes. She stood there in heavy silence. From behind, Cadiol rose from the rubble, seeking an answered S.O. "Princess." He made a tempting offer. "Would you like to abandon the Emperor who doesn't care about his daughter and become a member of this empire?" Cadiol placed a hand on his chest, looking quite confident. Orisha, clearly uncomfortable with his words, retorted, "What are you talking about?" Kirasari gently raised her hand and asked, "What's wrong?" She lightly touched Orisha's shoulder, her words meant to provoke. "Do you still want to be loyal to the father who abandoned you?" Orisha gritted her teeth and swatted the hand away. Kirasari simply smirked. She offered another enticing proposition. "I'll have your nanny brought here. Isn't she your true family?" Cadiol smiled slyly and invited her to join his side. "That we only want one thing from the princess, to become our strength when we need it." Orisha stood there, her gaze sharp and cold. Rewinding a bit earlier, on another side, inside a sphere, Cadiol held a knife to Orisha's throat provocatively. "What to do? Can you delay your daughter's death for a day?" As soon as he finished speaking, the sphere instantly shattered into small pieces that flew everywhere, causing Cadiol to exclaim in surprise. The sphere. Witnessing the scene, Robertus's face darkened, his hand clenching uncomfortably. "That I didn't do anything. Why did the sphere break?" he wondered. "What is your scheme, Cadiol Reventris?" A somewhat worried Cadiol called out, "Your Majesty." One noble offered their opinion. "We must assemble the knights immediately." Another noble had a different opinion. "But the war hasn't ended that long ago. If we go to war again now, the damage will be immense. The princess is strong. She'll definitely resolve this." Different opinions continued to be raised, followed by another noble. "This is like a declaration of war. It seems they're looking down on the power of our Empire." Another noble, full of anger, slammed his hand on the table in protest. "But the Reventris Empire is involved with black magic. We can't be confident that we'll win." They continued to argue, putting forth their own viewpoints, but forgot about Robertus, who was silent in front. He suddenly called out Cadiol. Hearing this, Cadiol immediately responded, "Yes, Your Majesty." With a serious and resolute expression, Robertus ignored everything and decided, "Assemble the knights." Back to the Reventris Empire. Inside the magnificent castle, Kirasari and Cadiol sat at the dining table, seemingly waiting for someone. Suddenly, Kirasari noticed a figure approaching. Orisha strode confidently and resolutely towards the two of them. Kirasari cheerfully said, "Have a seat, princess." In return, Orisha gave her a sharp glare. Facing the two people sitting there casually smiling, Orisha cursed inwardly, "Unlucky bunch." After a short conversation, she gradually understood the situation better. "Oh, you two are siblings?" Orisha asked, somewhat doubtful. Cadiol confirmed with great pride, "That's right. This is my older sister." Kirasari also enthusiastically replied, "He's my younger brother indeed." Witnessing the two confident individuals before her, Orisha couldn't help but remark sarcastically, "Such a deep sibling bond." With a darkened, emotionless expression, Orisha asked, "So, sending the assassin to the imperial palace during the debutante ball and holding the illegal auction were all you're doing? Was the person I met at that time you?" Cadiol cheerfully admitted, of course it was me. Although it's not something to be proud of in front of the princess, I do know a little about black magic. On the other side, Orisha subtly moved the knife in her hand as if about to do something. Instantly, she flung it past Karasari's face like a gust of wind. Orisha threatened, "Are you mocking me?" while Kirasari continued to eat casually. Seeing this, Cadiol gritted his teeth in anger. "Princess." Kirasari quickly intervened. "Sit down, Cadiol." She continued to explain calmly, "Please understand, Princess. On the day of the debutante ball, my younger brother was forced to do that to save me." Orisha, witnessing their nonchalant attitude, was extremely annoyed. "You seem quite cheerful." Kirasari sighed. "How could I not be?" With a relaxed air, she spoke. "This morning is a meeting with my trusted younger brother and a new person who will be on my side," while Cadiol sat there, clearly displeased. Orisha's side wasn't any less composed. She scoffed and said sarcastically, "Do you think that if I side with you, everything will be over?" Hearing this, she replied, "Do you need me to explain any part further?" Without keeping Kirasari waiting, a series of issues were raised, so the distribution of the Kazembulgar drug, the placement of dark magic users throughout the empire, and the illegal slave trade and illicit auctions. "How will you explain these?" Orisha asked with an impassive face. After hearing these words, Kirasari could only lower her head. "I apologize. I swear I didn't intend to throw the empire into chaos." She continued with a proposal. "If the princess agrees to cooperate with our empire, I swear I won't do such things again." Kirasari affirmed with utmost certainty. This made Orisha pensive. "I already know a little, but it seems the Reventris Empire and the Eastern Empire are truly enemies, aren't they?" She immediately went straight to the main point. "So, what exactly do you want from me?" Hearing this, Cadiol smirked with satisfaction. He cheerfully explained, "I'll tell you about that when the plan is complete." Orisha quickly agreed. "All right, let's do it that way." She replied with some interest, "I'll wait and see," and turned to leave. Somewhere else, Isabella's body gradually sank into deep water. She vaguely thought to herself, "That's strange. I clearly reported the kidnapping to His Majesty. Could it be? I'm dead." With lifeless, vacant eyes, Isabella fell into despair. Impossible. Suddenly, Orisha's image appeared and repeatedly called, "Isabella, Isabella." She struggled to raise her hand with her remaining weak strength. "I can't die and leave Her Highness behind." Isabella could only close her eyes and send out her final thoughts. "Your Highness, I apologize for not being able to protect you." Suddenly, a loud and clear voice called out, "Isabella," causing her to wake up immediately. Orisha asked worriedly, "Isabella, are you all right? Did you have a nightmare?" Seeing her, Isabella was so happy that her eyes welled up. With tears, she sat up and rushed to hug Orisha tightly. "Your Highness," Isabella anxiously asked, "are you all right? Are you hurt anywhere?" She replied with a happy smile, "Of course, I'm fine." Looking at that bright face, Isabella also felt somewhat relieved. She turned her head and looked around curiously. "But where is this?" Orisha calmly explained, "This is..." A shocking sentence rang out, "The Reventris Empire. I'll be staying here for a while." These words shocked her so much that her eyes went wide. Orisha gently touched Isabella's hand to reassure her. With tearful eyes full of love, she said, "If you don't want to, we could go back to the Empire." "Isabella." Orisha's eyes darkened. Isabella looked at her, somewhat dazed. She immediately grasped Orisha's hand tightly. "Oh, Your Highness." She comforted her. "Where would I go if Your Highness is here?" Orisha felt worried. These two sides are enemies. Isabella smiled. "Yes, being with Your Highness is fine. Don't worry." She continued, "But I'm a little worried because I don't know what Emperor Reventris is planning. It seems like he's using black magic here." She replied casually, "Don't worry." She continued, "We just need to kill him." This startled Isabella. Orisha laughed brightly, and seeing Isabella's reaction, she chuckled dismissively. Robertus was lost in thought, recalling that moment. At that time, he sat in a daze, staring at the shattered communication orb. A minister spoke up, "Your Majesty, we can't do that." "Why gather the knights?" Me worriedly said, "They kidnapped the princess's nanny without being detected, which proves they're not to be trifled with." They started to speak louder. "If you go, it will certainly be dangerous." Another person chimed in, and even the Empire's knights are in a precarious situation. Robertus frowned and said, "Then I will go to the Reventris Imperial Palace alone." Settles, astonished. "Try to stop him, Your Majesty." Another minister stood up and spoke. That's even worse. The person next to him added, you just returned not long ago, and now you want to fight again? And go alone. Robertus's gaze grew cold, silencing them instantly. He stood up. I will leave tomorrow morning. That's all you need to know. He pondered, yes, this terrible mood is all because of that emperor's provocation. Robertus thought of Arisha crying, knowing that child wouldn't be easily subdued. But a maid pushed in a cart. Settles, standing to the side, said, let me handle the rest. He handed Robertus a cup of tea. Your Majesty, I've had someone bring you tea. He watched Robertus drink the tea and continued, I'll see the ministers out and then return. Please consider this further, Your Majesty. Suddenly, Robertus felt strange, his actions startling Settles. He coughed up a mouthful of blood. He had been poisoned. Settles immediately shouted, Your Majesty, are you all right? We must call a doctor. Robertus's blood-covered hand gripped Settles's. He stared at Settles, stunned, and then collapsed. Settles called out, Your Majesty. At the Reventris Imperial Palace, in the dining room, Arisha was having a meal with the Reventris siblings. The aroma was enticing. A voice spoke, making her disgusted. Why do I have to see your face so early in the morning? Kadale smiled slyly and said, Because I've finished all the preparations. His words made her curious. Preparations? He continued, preparations for borrowing your power. I told you to side with us. Today, Kirisari, sitting beside them, said, The princess's role is the most important in this. Arisha was a little surprised. She frowned in annoyance and said, Stop beating around the bush and tell me clearly. Kadale took something out of his pocket. She was shocked when she saw it. He held up a vial of purple liquid. I'm sure you know what this is, right? She replied anxiously. Kassenberger. Kadale explained, that's right. It's essentially like a drug. But sometimes it can also become a deadly poison. And I'm going to give this to the Emperor. His expression became more menacing, infuriating her. Someone who had once been exposed to a large amount of black magic. When ingested, it severely damages internal organs and can lead to death. It's a power that gnaws at the human soul, inherently forbidden. So, excessive exposure harms both body and soul. The Emperor survived black magic, so if he were to drink that, Arisha spoke up, but is the Emperor foolish enough to drink that? Kadale laughed. How could he? It's all thanks to the spy we planted in the Imperial Palace. This took quite some time. Kirisari chimed in. Now we can finally talk about it, can't we? Kadale continued. In the Emperor's bedroom, there's a teleportation magic circle we painstakingly prepared. However, Kirisari cautioned, his power constantly repels black magic, so he'll wake up soon. We don't have much time. Kadale sneered. You only have to do one thing for me. Bring the Emperor here using teleportation magic. Then, finish him off. Arisha was indignant. You mean I have to commit such a heinous act of patricide? He retorted, he's a father who deserves resentment anyway. He hasn't shown you any affection. Isn't he nothing to you, princess? His words made her clench her jaw to suppress her anger. A voice interrupted no. Everyone's attention turned to the person who just entered the room. Isabella declared firmly, Your Highness. You mustn't do this. Arisha was surprised. Isabella. Kirisari scolded. We're talking to the princess. Isabella tried to persuade her. No matter how much you hate him, he's still your father. Harming the one who gave you life and put you on the throne will surely leave you uneasy. Kirisari sat down, fuming. Shouldn't you follow the path your master has chosen? Isabella cut her off. No, I must stop this no matter what. She continued. Don't even dream of using her highness's power for this. This brought Arisha a sense of relief. She clenched her fists. Isabella, please step back for now. Isabella immediately replied, Your Highness, I won't step back until you say you won't participate in this. Kadale, standing to the side, gritted his teeth in anger. He immediately approached the two women, despite his sister's attempt to stop him. Wait, Kadale, he grumbled. How dare you? You're just the princess's nanny. Isabella was taken aback. Kirisari was horrified. Arisha's eyes widened in shock as she saw Isabella struck to the ground. Kadale had hit Isabella. Arisha glared at him threateningly. You dare hit Isabella? He simply scoffed. She was being insolent. Arisha began to channel her magic. Perhaps I've been too lenient, making you think I'm just a 9-year-old child? Powerful surges of magic surrounded her. Touch Isabella again, and you're dead. Kadale and Kirisari were stunned by the immense power emanating from Arisha, who was now burning with rage, her magic intensifying. Golden light constricted around both of their throats. Kadale struggled to retaliate. Kirisari coughed up blood. Kadale cried out, "Sister! Sister!" A tremendous explosion erupted within the palace. Reventris, Kadale, pale, gasped, "No, it can't end like this." Then both Kirisari and he collapsed. Arisia turned and walked towards Isabella, who was unconscious on the floor. She used healing magic on her. She blamed herself. "I'm sorry I put you in danger." "Let's go back, Isabella." Scene change. Robertus lay restlessly in bed. He was sweating profusely. He opened his eyes and sat up with difficulty. That bastard Kadale Reventris. Did he plant a spy in the palace? He got out of bed and suddenly stepped on a magic circle. He was startled and teleported somewhere. In a dark cellar, Robertus was tied up, lying in a cell. He thought angrily, this isn't the dungeon under the palace. He sat up and saw Arisia standing before him. There was a hint of disbelief in his eyes. "Arisia?" he asked. She looked at him silently, her expression somber. Then she spoke. "Do you know that if I were an ordinary child, I would have become a cold corpse by now?" Her words stung him. Robertus closed his eyes and said, "Do you know that what you're doing is treason?" Arisia hesitated. "If you were going to abandon me like a stranger, you should have just strangled me when I was a child." She thought to herself, "I can understand the sadness and hatred of losing someone you love, but it's not my fault." However, he remained silent. Arisia clenched her fists. "Speak, your majesty." She pleaded silently, "Please." Robertus said, "I never want a child." His words shocked her. She brought a trembling hand to her chest. Arisia thought, "I never yearned for love anyway. I didn't even expect a little bit. I really..." Suddenly, a voice interrupted her. "Really? You never yearned for love?" Losing control of her anger, she immediately grabbed him by the throat. Robertus could only grit his teeth and endure. Ugh. Her eyes were bloodshot. She pondered, "Yes, maybe I did have a little hope." She released her grip on Robertus's throat, but only that. She picked up a nearby sword and pointed it directly at him. Arisia said in despair, "I've heard my answer." Robertus replied indifferently, "Not bad, is it?" Suddenly, tears fell to the ground. Stunning him, "Arisia!" he called out, but she cut him off. Crying, she swung the sword at him. Then, "Get out of my sight, your majesty." Arisia realized she was in an unfamiliar place. People were bustling about excitedly. "Hurry, the wedding is starting." The town was lively, fireworks exploding as if celebrating someone's wedding. She was a little dazed. The people around her were excited, joyful, and happy. The son of the empire, Emperor Robertus Alopecia, and the light of the empire, Empress Cecilia Bronia, a voice announced. Both looked very happy. Cecilia smiled at Robertus amidst the blessings from the people. "Your Majesty, long live the empire." They kissed. Arisia watched the happy scene before her. Cecilia asked curiously, "What did you want to show me?" Robertus happily covered her eyes. "Just a little further, Cecin." She said inquisitively, "Robert." They both stepped into the magic circle and disappeared. Robertus removed his hand from her eyes. "Open your eyes, Cecin." She looked around excitedly, then turned to ask, "Is this what you wanted to show me?" He replied, "Yes. It took me quite a while to prepare this." That tree was the one he had napped under before. Cecilia reminisced, "That tree." Cecilia happily jumped up and hugged him. "Thank you, Robert." Scene change. Heavy rain poured down. Inside a room, the royal physician reported, "Your Majesty, she is barren. Her body is already quite frail." Cecilia sadly said, "It's okay." Robertus anxiously comforted her. "Cecilia." She softly reassured him, "I'm all right, Robert. It's possible." She blamed herself, "But it's just, I feel sorry for you." He said, "Don't say that." He took her hand. "Cecilia, I only need you. I don't need an heir." The scene began to change. Cecilia began to kneel and pray. "Please let me have a child. White Witch. Please let me meet my child." Arisia felt a terrible headache. "What is this sound?" Cecilia continued, "I know Robert wants a child too. I hope he won't only give his love to me, but also to our child." These words made Arisia feel a little uncomfortable. She remembered the image of Cecilia praying. She wished, "I want to build a happy family. The child, him, and me too. We'll all be happy." This stunned her for a moment. Then she gave a wry smile, assessing the situation. "This is a terrible thing." Arisia pondered, thinking back. "Everything is very strange. Why did I lower myself and hide? Just to not go against the Emperor's wishes. If I were determined, of course, eliminating the Emperor and this empire would be incredibly easy." Although she knew there were too many strange points, she sadly remained silent. "But why did I so easily overlook those things?" A clear voice rang out. "White Witch, ever since we were little, Robert and I never knew what a family was like." Cecilia prayed sincerely, I want our child to grow up surrounded by boundless love." Arisia looked down at her, contemplating That's right, I wanted to fulfill that earnest wish. She felt incredibly heartbroken, and I also wanted to feel love. So I set a limit for myself. With a magic spell called Wish. The magic returned me to the day I heard about the Emperor's situation, but the power started to become chaotic, as if it didn't want to harm the Emperor. The uncomfortable feeling of not being loved, everything. The scene shifted to a castle engulfed in a thunderstorm. The atmosphere inside the room, incredibly gloomy. A servant announced, the Empress may not survive the day. Cecilia's condition was critical. Robertus frantically pleaded, please, please. Cecilia, I can't live without you. You know that better than anyone. I said I didn't need children, so please. He trembled, clutching her hand tightly. She smiled wearily and said to him, Robert, promise me you won't deny that this is our child. Please love them. Robertus released her hand. In the Black Forest in the western part of the empire, there's a medicinal herb that can cure all kinds of illnesses. Cecilia looked puzzled. Robert? He turned around. I'll find it for you. Despite her calling Robert, Arisha stood to the side, watching Cecilia's condition. Her breaths were incredibly labored. Cecilia's gaze landed on her where she stood. Arisha was startled, thinking, did she see me? She hesitated, then spoke. Do you regret your wish? Cecilia smiled. 10 months of holding my child in my arms was the happiest time. Cecilia's words made her clench her fists. She offered comfort. It's all right. If you don't want to, you don't have to. Do anything. Live your own life. Suddenly, the chains that bound her broke and vanished. My wish has ended. In Arisha's room, Robertus sat beside her bed. The royal physician reported, Your Majesty, the princess's health is perfectly fine. Perhaps she fainted from shock. Then he left, leaving a gloomy Robertus sitting there. He recalled the sight of her raising her sword in disappointment. Then get out of my sight, Your Majesty. He was puzzled. She was clearly stabbed in the heart. So what's going on? Robertus pondered, I didn't have the courage to love the child in exchange for Cecilia. He looked at Arisha's form, remembering her as a child. He touched Arisha, gently lifting her up, thinking, but this is Cecilia's child. He kissed her forehead. I can't hate her. It wasn't that he had never set foot in the princess's palace, but he was afraid he would vent his resentment on her, so he could only observe from afar. Robertus stood from his room, observing Arisha playing in the garden with the maids. He fell into deep thought at the sight before him. 3 years after returning from the war, he had met that child again. He saw her curtsy politely. Her eyes weren't like those of a normal child, and not in a way that seemed forced. At that time, Arisha smiled and said, I thought you wouldn't attend the debutante ball. She spoke casually. You didn't tell me beforehand, so I said that. He pondered. Those eyes held no yearning for love. So he thought she didn't see him as her father, but he realized something too late. The truth that this child longed to be loved. Some time passed, and the royal physician looked at a scowling Robertus with some unease. He glared. Why hasn't she woken up yet? He frightened the physician. Why, yes. I said the princess is in perfect health, so this can't be called an illness. He replied indifferently. Is that so? Seeing him draw his sword, the royal physician panicked even more. A hand darted out to stop Robertus. Settle said anxiously, You can't kill him. His eyes were bloodshot. What? Settle explained, Your Majesty, you know he's the most renowned physician in the empire. The royal physician trembled on the verge of tears. Settle continued, If it weren't him, no one else would be able to understand the princess's condition. This only fueled his rage. Robertus slammed his sword on the ground. He turned to Devine and asked, Is it black magic? Devine replied, These aren't symptoms of black magic, Your Majesty. Robertus said, Then is there nothing else that can be done? He responded awkwardly, It appears that way now, Your Majesty. Robertus looked at Arisha with anguish, then called out Settle. He immediately responded, Yes, Your Majesty. Robertus ordered, Gather all the mages who can cast a teleportation circle. Settle was astonished. Yes, but why? Robertus's face darkened. We're going to the Western Empire. Settle stammered, Why, Your Majesty, there will be war. But Robertus was resolute. We're going to the Black Forest. A moment later, Arisha suddenly opened her eyes. Clutching her head, she sat up. Ow, my head. Where am I? A nearby voice called out, Your Highness, drawing her gaze. Settle asked anxiously, Now that you've awakened, what should we do? The physician beside him wept with relief. Oh, thank goodness, Your Highness. Arisha, still clutching her head in discomfort, ordered, "Explain this situation." Seto replied, "Yes." His Majesty said that if you hadn't awakened by the time he returned, he would behead everyone. Arisha's face darkened. "What nonsense," she exclaimed. She thought, he was quick to abandon me, wasn't he? Is he bipolar? Just then, Isabella arrived with water. Seeing Arisha awake, she asked worriedly, "Your Highness, are you all right?" Seeing her, Arisha smiled and replied, "Yes, I'm fine." "But where did the Emperor?" "No, where did my father go?" Isabella replied, "He went to the Black Forest in the Western Empire, Your Highness." Hearing this answer, Arisha paused mid-drink and asked, "What? Why there?" "I'm not sure, Your Highness. I only know that he went there to find a medicinal herb that can cure all kinds of illnesses." Arisha pondered. "There again? I have a bad feeling about this." The scene shifted to the Black Forest. Robertus and Raven had arrived. Raven yawned repeatedly as he walked behind Robertus. Seeing this, Robertus said, "Stay here so you don't get in the way." The moon was high in the sky. Robertus walked forward with a serious expression. He recalled the Black Forest of legend, a place teeming with monsters and guarded by the forest keeper. 9 years ago, I couldn't set foot in the forest because of a mysterious power. Back in the present, Robertus sensed something and glanced behind him. He saw a clawed paw appear. Then, 3 large wolves emerged. Robertus drew his sword, swiftly dispatching each one. Blood splattered across his face. As if drawn by the scent of their slain brethren, more and more wolves appeared. Robertus remained calm, thinking, "Fortunately, I was able to enter this time." He quickly charged, cutting them down. As he raised his hand to wipe the blood from his face, he suddenly noticed something. I found it. That herb. He reached out to pick it when something brushed past his face. Countless vines shot towards him. Robertus thought, "Is that what protects the herb?" Then Robertus focused his power into the sword. Next, he quickly rushed in to attack them. The branches momentarily faltered against Robertus's power. He seized the opportunity. At this moment, Robertus raised his sword high and stabbed it into the tree trunk. But a protective barrier appeared. It threw him back. Robertus's eyes turned completely red. He stood there observing. Looking at the great tree in front of him, Robertus thought, "This is the first time I've felt the breath of death since becoming a sword saint. If I touch that thing, I'll probably die before I can save Arisha. First, I have to retreat." Thinking this, Robertus turned around. He ran quickly forward, with countless branches shooting towards him from behind. Raven had activated the teleportation circle and waved to him. Robertus gave the order, "Return to the Imperial Palace immediately." The scene shifted to Arisha's room, where she was leisurely eating mushroom soup. While enjoying the flavor, a bright green light appeared. Robertus and Raven had teleported there. Settle, seeing him, shouted, "Your Majesty, you're back." Arisha glanced over and couldn't help but think, still pretty intact compared to those who've set foot in the Black Forest before. Robertus turned to look at her and was startled, calling out Arisha. Suddenly, the palace shook. Debian jumped, asking, "What was that? What's going on?" Isabella also seemed confused. "An earthquake?" Arisha looked at him, her lips pursed. Then she asked, "Your Majesty, did you touch the divine tree in the Black Forest?" She silently pleaded, "Please say no, I beg you." Robertus looked at her for a moment. Then he looked away, avoiding her gaze. Seeing his actions, she thought, "Oh no, we're doomed." Her answer came in the form of a series of lightning bolts. Striking down, the palace shook violently. Arisha anxiously said, "Your Majesty, quickly evacuate everyone and absolutely do not show yourself." An explosion occurred outside the palace. A young boy appeared, whispering, "Trying to run away?" He floated outside. Inside, Arisha cast a spell. As she created a protective barrier, she thought, "The current situation isn't good. There are too many people in the Imperial Palace." The boy's voice echoed, "I haven't felt your power in the moonlight lately. But what's with your appearance now?" Arisha frowned and suggested, "Tone down the murderous aura a bit." Kazan, he asked angrily, "That's funny. Do you know what he did?" He tried to stab the divine tree with his sword. Arisha's jaw dropped. What? Touching it wasn't enough? He tried to stab it? Arisha looked at Robertus. Catching her eye, he quickly looked at Raven, avoiding her gaze. As for Raven, his soul had left his body at this point. She lamented to herself, "It seems the Empire will fall today." Kazan clenched his fists in anger. "Because of him, I had to come all the way here, so don't even dream of covering for him." Arisha sighed and said, "I can't, despite appearances, he's related to me by blood." Kazan was surprised. "What? Did your body, turning into a child, also affect your mind?" She replied, "What are you thinking? That I'm just a child? I thought it would be obvious just by looking. You're still so naive." She stroked her chin, thinking, I have to shift the attention to myself. Just as she hoped, Kazan smirked and replied, "It's been several hundred years, hasn't it? You want to try, don't you?" Arisha smiled triumphantly. "Got you. You fell for it." Another explosion rocked the area outside the palace. Kazan emitted dark magic around himself. Arisha's face fell as she thought. Most people have been evacuated. Looking at the purplish-black aura surrounding him, she frowned in disgust. He's gotten this close already? The dark magic was so thick, it gave off a horrific stench. Arisha clenched her fists, gathering her power. "So you want to play it this way?" She flew into the air, streaks of golden light enveloping her. She raised her hand. Golden streams of light appeared in the sky. She condensed them into a large sphere, thinking, "Then I'll crush everything to ashes." Kazan looked up in surprise, fear flashing in his eyes. Golden rings rained down before him. Arisha landed softly and urged, "I'll spare you. So let's end this here, Kazan. How dare you destroy the Imperial Palace?" Kazan's response was a barrage of dark magic hurtling towards her. Arisha quickly cast a spell to block it. The dark magic that reached her was deflected. Kazan then unleashed another wave of dark magic. Arisha shielded her eyes with her hands. When she lowered her hands, she was alone. Arisha looked around, frowning. Where'd he go? Sensing something above, she glanced up. Kazan suddenly appeared, diving down too. "Attack her." Arisha quickly dodged, but a few strands of her hair were severed. Infuriated, she thought, "He dared to cut my hair? I'll make him pay when I catch him." Kazan laughed. "Huh? You said I'd be caught." He gathered dark magic in his hands, forming a large sphere. With a challenging smirk, he taunted, "Let's see if you can stop this." Arisha watched him, thinking he seems determined. This is getting troublesome. Suddenly, footsteps approached. Robertus stood in front of her. Arisha was momentarily stunned. She stared at his broad back, just as Kazan's attack struck. When the dust settled, Robertus was kneeling, clutching his arm. Arisha cried out in alarm, "Your Majesty, what are you doing?" Kazan sighed. "How stupid. The Emperor is just a human after all." The onlookers panicked. His Majesty's arm. Someone call a physician. Arisha stood frozen, watching the commotion. Kazan clicked his tongue. He didn't notice Arisha's lips pressing into a thin, angry line, her hands clenching into fists, slowly rising. He rambled on. Humans really overreact over nothing. Before he could finish, Arisha delivered a powerful punch, sending Kazan sprawling. Ow. "Why did you hit me?" Arisha remained silent, her lips still pressed tightly together. She watched as servants helped the collapsing Robertus. A moment later, Robertus was taken to his room. His breathing was labored. Looking at her hand, she thought, "Even near the Emperor, I can control my magic now. My dream has come true." Anyway, the Emperor was already weak before facing the dark magic. Being hit by Kazan's attack, which is even stronger than KDO's, he'll probably die soon. It's a miracle he's held on this long. She glanced at the doctor behind her. Looking at Robertus's injured arm, she continued her thought process. Because this is a wound caused by dark magic, no doctor or mage at the magic tower can heal it. The only person who can heal it is Kazan, the one who inflicted it. And me. She thought for a moment, then turned and left. Arisha arrived at another room and opened the door to enter. Seeing her, Kazan crossed his arms, smiled, and asked, "You're here?" "Well," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "The stench from His Majesty's arm is reaching all the way here. What are we going to do?" Arisha didn't say anything, just glared at him. Unafraid, Kazan continued, "What's wrong? Aren't you going to heal him?" Arisha, not want to back down, retorted, "Yeah, what are we going to do?" Kazan asked again, "You said earlier that he shares the same blood as you. So why are you so fickle?" Arisha, losing her patience, said, "This is tiring. Don't make me say it again." Kazan replied, "Still like this even though you've grown up? So stingy. I thought only your body had become small, but it seems both your body and mind are like that." Arisha plopped down on the chair opposite him, annoyed. "It's because you've never experienced it. Do you know how frustrated I've been, being treated like that for the past 9 years?" Kazan calmly replied, "I don't know. But you signed a contract with Emperor of Ventress, right? Do you know how much trouble I've gone through because of him? And in the end, you sent him away. Don't change the subject. What are you going to do with the Emperor? Are you just going to leave him like this?" Arisha paused slightly. Then she pursed her lips as he continued. "He's human, but he's endured it long enough. Aren't you tired?" Arisha suddenly stood up. Seeing her walk away, he called after her, "What? Where are you going?" Arisha turned back, full of anger. "You're really annoying." Kazan set his teacup down and sighed, lucky for the emperor. He has a daughter willing to save his life. Thank you for watching today's video. Our story continues with many exciting developments ahead, so don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to support us and not miss the latest episodes. We wish you relaxing and enjoyable moments. See you in the next video. Thank you for watching.